TikTok time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching, except for Nicole, who's complaining constantly late. This is the proof. It's constantly kissing. It's constantly kissing, not constantly late.
That's true. Get it right.
Hey.
Wait, man, I need to share the link, man. What is this?
Yeah, what kind of dirtbag doesn't share a link, man?
Yeah. Anyway.
You just got to say, we're live.
All right.
We're live and based.
We're live and live.
Yo,
All
what's
right,
up?
man. What's up,
Are you
man? What's up, man?
are you announcing your debate or not? If not, we'll keep it quiet and I won't mention it at all. No one will know.
Well, I already announced it, but apparently there was a little bit of a misunderstanding somewhere with James. So trying to figure stuff out. But this week I'm gonna have a debate on Thursday. It was originally meant to be with Orthodox Muslim, but apparently it's actually with D's response, not with Orthodox Muslim. So
He probably doesn't want to debate anymore because people are on to his duck lips.
Yeah. And I said, I'm not interested in your duck lips. I just want to debate. So, but still waiting. So this week on Thursday, I will probably be debating D's response, and I'm not sure when I'm going to be debating Orthodox Muslim. But yeah, that's going on.
Huh. And have you announced the topic?
The topic is Islam true?
I have to say, for the 487,000th time, they really don't like those kinds of topics. So hats off to him for agreeing to that topic. I'll say it again, ladies and gentlemen. If Islam is true and they believe that there's good evidence for it, if they believe they have some sort of compelling case for Islam, the topics they should always want to be going to should be, is Islam true? Was Muhammad a true prophet? Is the Quran the word of God? If you win any of those, you win. You just win. If you can show that Islam is true or that Muhammad is a true prophet or that the Quran is the word of God, you win. You win. They don't want to go near that. They're always like, no, let's just debate the Trinity so we can attack the Trinity.
If my daughter...
And then, let's debate and defend child marriage.
Yeah,
seriously,
If
you'd
my
rather defend
daughter-
that? You'd rather defend that than Islam?
the thing is, it's kind of confusing to me because I offered this topic to Orthodox Muslim because Orthodox Muslim messaged me, or Orthodox Muslim messaged me like a while ago. No, he didn't message me. He made a post about me, and he said,
"How can you reject Islam when my duck lips are the proof?"
Yes. Like he said, I challenge you to debate me on any topic about Trinity and this and this and that. And I said, I will debate any topic with you under the condition that we first debate the topic, is Islam true?
Hey,
and he said,
hey,
I accept.
I just said that. I just said that to you earlier. I said they don't want to touch Muhammad, not in the way Al Zut did, but not in any other way at all. Period. They don't want to go near that. Or the Quran, or is Islam true? And I said the only time they'll do it is if it's a condition for getting a different debate that they actually want. Can you imagine the only time they'll defend Muhammad is just if they want to attack something more? Like attacking something else is so important to them that, okay, we'll reluctantly defend Islam for one debate.
But the thing is, I thought, oh, okay, so I guess we're doing this topic because I set a condition now and he accepted the condition here, which is why we're actually doing this debate. Oh, very, very cool. But then it turns out it's actually it's not Orthodox Muslim, but D's response that I'm debating. So he also accepted that debate topic. So I don't know, it's pretty good, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good.
Pretty impressive. So, so D's response. The only thing I'm trying to think of anything I still can't tell the difference between them in my head. But now I'm starting to be able to picture Orthodox Muslim just because of the duck lips thing. So that's cool. But anyway, we've only covered, I think we went through a couple of his Islamic dilemma response videos at some point, and then he just whined like a baby and stuff like that over on God Logic's channel. I think so. But I would have no clue what he would argue to defend Muhammad or to defend that Islam is true. Like what could they used to have the perfect preservation of the Quran argument that was so totally destroyed that it shook a bunch of the confidence of young Muslims, helped the avalanche of apostasy. They used to argue the scientific miracles that didn't work at all until Ali Dawah was forced to admit that that's been debunked. And so now, like, what are they down to? There's the arguments that they're not going to use. There's the arguments that they're not going to use, like, oh, what about Muhammad's giant mole? This is one of their main early arguments. He has a mole, and the mole is described in the Christian sources, and it's mentioned that there's a huge mole, and if someone shows up with a huge mole, you should believe in him. And you don't see them using that because even they know that's stupid. But Allah's main argument in the Quran is he's affirming our scriptures, therefore we should believe in Muhammad and the Quran. But then Muslims never use, isn't that, I seriously find that amazing. Like Allah, their God, in their book that they believe is the perfect eternal speech of Allah. He says, guys, here is my main number one go-to argument for why Jews and Christians should believe in Muhammad and the Quran. And here it is, my go-to by far argument that Islam is the truth. I'm affirming all of your scriptures, Jews and Christians. And no, I've never seen one Muslim use that. It's Allah's main argument. It's like they acknowledge that Allah's main argument is a complete joke.
Well, I personally think that there are some arguments that should be used and some arguments that should not be used. I would say that one of the strongest arguments that could be used in favor of Islam, and I expect my opponent to use one of those. So the strongest argument, in my opinion, is that Muhammad had the sexual strength of 30 men. And because it is one that you see directly in the Islamic sources. You see it directly in the Hadith, where it is said that, the companions say that we used to say that the Prophet had the sexual strength of 30 men. This is how he was able to satisfy all the al-Zut and his wives. So, and I would say that this is an argument that should be used. And if I was a Muslim, I would be using this argument. So I'm not sure what else they could possibly be bringing up.
But isn't it amazing? Like the early arguments. Look, I got this mole. How could I not be a prophet with this mole? And it's in your scriptures that I affirm. That's how you know I'm a true prophet. I'm affirming your scriptures. And oh, by the way, if you still have any doubts, I have the strength of 30 men injected into my behind. This means I'm a true prophet. Are you guys serious? Hey, you know what we need to do? Since they'll never use these arguments, we need like a kind of mock debate.
Yeah.
We might need Shake Your Booty to come out of retirement, and I'll have a debate with Shake Your Booty.
Yes,
but he'll use the actual arguments that were persuasive to Muhammad's 7th century idiot companions. These bunch of lunatics who, oh my goodness, he does have a mole. Okay, why are you taking that as because the guy who's saying that his mole is proof that he's a prophet also says that this mole is described in the scriptures of the Jews and Christians as the wait. So he's just telling you it's in there, right? Did he show you this in the scriptures? No, but he says it's there, and he's a prophet, so he must be telling us the truth.
Why would he be lying?
Why would he lie about the proof? Now let's give him our wives and daughters so he can bang them because he's a prophet and he had the sexual strength of 30 men injected into his fun cakes. What is this religion, man? What is this religion? Let's see. Someone said, is young Bob in jail? Not that I know of. I think they just escorted him out of the park or something like that.
Yeah. They just kicked him out. He wasn't behaving.
Oh boy!
By he wasn't behaving, I mean the Muslims were upset with him. That's why he was kicked out.
Isn't that crazy? Like,
yes.
Seriously, the level of the Dawah gang cowardice that now They constantly call the cops. Someone's doing what? What? Think about it. They put themselves in that position, just as Muhammad put himself in a certain position with the men of Al-Zut. But they're the ones who put themselves in this position to get intellectually zooted, right? But not but in the Muhammad sense. That was stupid. But think about this. They declare war on Muhammad Hijab's ex-wife for exposing him for the way he's treating Muslim women behind the scenes and using them, basically turning them into his hotel wives and basically turning them into prostitutes. Yeah. And you had all these guys willing to help him completely lie about her. And then you've got an autistic 17-year-old Christian who calls them out and asks them about it. And they're like, police, come save us, police. Oh, boy. A bunch of cowards, man.
Bunch of cowards,
man. The sexual, Zane says, the sexual strength to take on 30 men. Hey, I was going to jump right into this video this time instead of checking out the super chats, but I see IP here posted something. So
IP too.
We should all get Garka tree tattoos to show we will never sell out our Jewish friends. That's a cool idea.
I was just thinking. So you recommended that I should put that on a T-shirt, and I thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. But maybe something like that. You know, I am the Garka tree, which is a very, very nice message to it.
That could also be the title of your album.
Yeah.
AP, what kind of state is the state of Israel? And which state is the greatest state of all?
Israel is the Jewish state, the greatest state of all. According to Cenk Uygur.
What a lunatic. So Orthodox Lips ducked out again?
Apparently, I don't know.
It's in his name. I mean, why is he going to call himself Orthodox Lips if he's not going to duck out of everything?
Ducky boy.
What has been? Oh, here's a good. What has been the reaction to the Garka tree rap? Has that? You played it live yesterday. I mean, you played it while we were live yesterday. Has it been released yet?
A lot of no, I haven't released it yet. But a lot of people have said it's awesome. When is it out? And stuff. So really, really good reactions. But I'm gonna put it out this week. Inshallah.
Dude, it will be cool. You are, I mean, you should, at the rate you're going, you should have an actual full album before the end of the year with like 10 or 12 songs on it, man.
I should.
Everyone's going to be rocking. Everyone's going to be rocking
most
with that.
Of the songs are kind of stalling because I kind of want to do something better with most of them. But I don't know. We'll see.
AP, you think he will avoid the topic and attack Jews? Yeah, do we know how this guy debates? I don't think I've seen any of his debates.
I don't really know. He's a big fan of Farid, apparently. So I'm not sure what he's gonna do. I don't know.
How do we know that Islam is true? Because we hate the Jews more than anybody else. This proves that it's true. That would be Daniel's argument if he had to defend Islam.
When are you busy? Maybe we should sit down. I think tomorrow maybe we should sit down and have a little thing, just have a little throwback and review that second debate that you had with Daniel Kikichu, because it was absolutely insane, and I want to look at that again. You know?
Why the heck would anyone ever want to look at that?
Because it was so freaking insane that he actually came into the debate and turned the whole debate into the Jews when it has nothing to do with the topic.
He started talking, and I was like, if he spends his entire opening statement on this, I am so glad I did not prepare, because I'd have been seriously mad if I'd prepared for maybe he's going to bring this up, maybe he's going to bring that up, maybe he's going to bring this up, and all he brings up is, I hate the Jews. I'd have been like really ticked off if I'd spent like 2 weeks preparing for a bunch of things that never come up. I'd have been pretty enraged. Orthodox Lips Muslim says, "You're ducking me. These lips don't lie." Lips. Hey, AP, you need an entire song about Orthodox Lips Muslim, and it's called "These Lips Don't Lie." These lips don't lie, so don't stop ducking me. All right, here we go. This is what I wanted to get to. Inspiring Philosophy says, "I am confused. Did Who is OM? Oh, Orthodox Lips Muslim back out and Dean jump in. How did Dean get involved with this? Orthodox Lips Muslim came into our live and demanded we debate him. This looks suspicious unless I'm missing. Oh yeah,
No, what actually happened is so James was arranging it. James was arranging the debate with Orthodox Lips Muslim, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's go with this topic, this format, this, and so on. Then eventually, this morning, he actually sent me a message and said, hey, I'm very sorry, I got confused, and this entire time I thought that Orthodox Muslim was messaging with me, but it was actually Dean Response. And
dude,
said,
isn't that legitimately funny? Because again, apart from now, I can actually picture the duck lips smooching face. Yeah. Apart from that, I have I can't even picture the difference between them in my head. And I know that one of them's from somewhere else, like Australia or something like that. And so I think one of them has an accent and stuff, but I could not tell that. I haven't seen enough of them to know the difference. But anyway, isn't it funny if everyone else can't tell the difference between them too?
That would be hilarious. But I don't know what happened. So James said he got confused and he apologized. And I was like, hey, it's fine, man. Happens. And he said, so would you be okay with debating Dean Response instead? And I said, yeah, I will debate Dean's Response. But also, please let me know what happened with Orthodox Lips. So, yeah. That's the situation.
Because I wasn't even thinking about what IP said here. He started getting called Orthodox Lips Muslim because he was like, "Why is everyone running from me?" Like, who in the blue hell is running from you? We're all willing to debate you.
Ain't nobody running.
And we started telling him to come to debate con and stuff like this, and he's like, "No, I'm busy. I'll be busy in the desert." I'm gonna go out into the desert where they beat me in the desert and my lips. But I have to do it because it keeps my lips full and plump and helps me with my pictures. But what sucks now is if you debate D's Responds, then Orthodox Lips Muslims still gonna be see, they're all running from me. They're all scared. That's the big thing. In Dawa, you have to tell your stupid fans that everyone's running from you, no matter how many times people agree to debate you.
Nobody running from nobody.
It was like we agreed to like 5 different debates with what's his face, Jake, the Muslim metaphysician. He backed out of all of them, and he would still be on Twitter. They're scared to debate me. They're running from me, and all his fans. Oh yes, they're scared of you because you're so powerful and based with your arguments.
He's the most pathetic guy. I mean, he agreed to debate you, then backed out. He agreed to debate me, then backed out, and then he still goes around claiming that we are scared of him. What a freaking loser!
Oh boy, what in the world? He will use whatever the oldest defense is. They recycle because they think we forget. Yeah, so they can't use any of their recent arguments that all got debunked. I would guess. I have no clue about the guy, so you could actually go through his videos, but I'd guess. It's just because they're kind of getting down to like Muhammad in the Bible, which is just hilarious. They're going, no, we don't agree with the Bible. We think it's corrupt. Okay, what's your proof? Oh, Muhammad's in the Bible. What a joke of a religion, man. Oh, boy. There is this issue of recycling. We'll destroy arguments and then they'll stop using them because they're all destroyed, and then like 20 years later they'll bring back the argument for a new crowd who doesn't know how to respond to it.
Yeah.
It's an endless cycle of deception. That's what Dawa is.
Urinating upon one another. That's what they do.
D Wood, dude, shut up about the mole. They'll figure out it's actually the proof. That would be funny if that argument came back and someone like actually made some argument. But look, we have all these sources about his mole. How can you? And then like the avalanche of apostasy stopped, and all the people who've left Islam like went back to Islam. They're like, why did no one tell us about this mole?
It would be funny if they actually started making TikTok videos about how this is the great proof that Islam is true.
That would be funny. We should say. I'm telling you, man, we got to have Shake Your Booty debating and using the actual arguments that were persuasive in 7th century Arabia to complete morons. Orthodox lips ran like a flock of seagulls, ran so far away. So far away. Sexual strength and no children.
The children.
He officially had children, although there are people who think all those kids were someone else's.
Yeah, they were.
Al-Zutsut riot. That's what you could call your album, Al Zoot Suit Riot.
No.
D. Wood, how do Dawaists respond when you point out to them that the Quran says Jews worship Ezra as the son of God, but in actual fact, the Jews do not? I'll tell you, they respond, well, maybe it was some local group that we have no record of, or maybe it was, I think Shabir said, maybe it was even just one guy. It was just one guy who said it, something like that. That only works if you don't, I mean, it doesn't even work with the Quran, right? Because it's laying out blanket condemnations. It's
Yeah.
Christians say this and Jews say this. If you think, oh, well, maybe when it comes to the Jew with Ezra, maybe it was just one dude or some local tribe. Why is that? Why is the complaint against Christians a general issue, like a general thing for Christians? It's a general Christian belief that you're attacking. You have this other one. But if you take the Hadith seriously, it really, that response really doesn't work, because this is going to be the general condemnation of Jews on the day of judgment, that they worshipped Ezra.
That's the problem. The Hadith literally says so. It's the Quran is one thing, you can go and say, oh no, it actually refers to some Jews and all that, and it doesn't. And you can make that case very well. But then the Hadith actually clearly says that on the day of judgment, Allah will bring forth the Christians and will say, "What did you believe?" And they will say, "We believed in Jesus. He's that he's God and Son of God." And Allah will say, "You are liars, liar! You're finished already," and He will drop them into hell. And then the Jews will come forth, and He will ask them, "What did you believe?" And the Jews will say, "We believed in Ezra, the son of Allah." And Allah will say, "Liar! He's not the son of Allah. Go to hell." So that's pretty much what the Hadith literally says. So there is just no way out. It was clearly Muhammad's assumption that the Jews actually worshipped Ezra as the son of God. And I'm not sure how that happened. Probably the Jews trolled him and he kind of fell for it or something. But, it's pretty damning.
It is, and we use it regularly. We use that as one of our main points that of inaccuracies in the Quran. But we probably need to start using that even more. Next time you're in Israel, you should go around interviewing Jews and just asking them why they worship Ezra, and they'll all be extremely confused.
That's my plan. That's my plan indeed.
Yeah, you remember when I was asking the guy at the table about that and stuff like this. He's like, "What?" He says, "The only response you'll ever get from Jews about that is like, what? I have a cousin Ezra, but that's like the only Ezra I know." "Oh, you're worshiping him. You're just lying." I bet you Hakikachu would just no. Of course they do, and they all just lie.
Yeah. But it's just. I would say that even the argument is so good that I would say that it is on its own a very strong piece of evidence, or I would even say, proof that Islam is false. It is that strong because it makes a very clear and very explicit claim that is demonstrably false. And
you've got it, you know what it means because you've got it in the Quran, and you've got it from Allah in the Quran, and you've got it from Muhammad repeatedly in the Hadith. We should so this year is the year of the Islamic dilemma, and guys, about to get bigger, about to become way more of a problem before the end of the year. And then it's going to be snowballing so fast that that's going to be an avalanche by itself. But next year, since they're falling back on Muhammad and the Bible, next year is going to be we're going to go through every possible thing, because they've been getting increasingly more and more deceptive, right? So it used to just be, oh, Muhammad's in Deuteronomy 18:18, and Muhammad's in John 14:16. Then people catch on how to respond to this. Now they're like, oh, if you go to this claim by this church father, and they'll quote mine, and they'll completely rip something out of context, and they'll say, oh, and this later commentary says this, and they'll pull a quote out of context, and they'll twist all this stuff together into a case for Muhammad. Why? Because people haven't read all that stuff, so you can get away with it for a while. Well, we're going to make next year the last year that they can get away with any of this, because we're going to go through everything that they actually bring up from any church father, any commentary. It's a bunch of liars. Going to expose it. But also, since we're doing that next year, that's like the 2026 project. We might want something where you have like the argument of the month. You know what I mean? Where we
Yeah.
like things work better when we like coordinate and a bunch of Christian apologists all put out the same stuff. That's when the Dawa guys panic and stuff like that. So we could like coordinate like an argument per month or something like that, and just have like a month where we all deal with the Ezra issue and then something else the next month and so on. Might be fun. Might be fun. It's
They'll be totally based.
Dawa's crumbling. Oh,
It has
Mole.
been a very heavy year so far already for Dawa. It has been very, very brutal for Dawa. I mean, the whole Muhammad Hijab thing, plus Ali Dawa thing, then like Ikichu coming and having 2 debates with you and then completely losing them embarrassingly. It's
Yasser Qadi throwing the like all of the hadith methodology under the bus and saying this can't stand up to scholarly scrutiny, but so we just have to accept it by blind faith. Showing up in various places like Times Square and them just crumbling over and over again. Yeah, pretty.
It was fun. I sensed
bad
it when I went to Speaker's Corner and saw how the Muslims are just not doing well. Like as a group, as a force, they're not doing well. They handed it over to the Christians.
Dawa's on life support, ladies and gentlemen. And now what do Muslims do at Speaker's Corner? They called the police. Can you protect us? Someone might criticize what we're saying. We don't like it when they can criticize what we're saying. Can you please enforce Sharia for us? Bunch of cowards, man.
Believe.
Elder Dawa Troll says, "Oh, mole of Muhammad. It's the holy moly of Muhammad. The holy moly of Momo.
Holy
mole.
moly.
The men of Al-Zut like moles. Oh, mole of Muhammad, how do I gain more strength? Mole, Al-Zut. They gave me the strength of 30 men, you thief. A magic mole has spoken." We should make the mole a character in this stuff. Hey, look at this. Hang on. Wait for it. Here we go. Ready?
Yes.
Look at this. You ever see Total Recall?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, this is Quato. He's a mutant, so he's like is a weird offshoot of this other dude. But that could be, imagine if that was on the back, right? Imagine if that was on his back. That would be Muhammad's mole. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yes.
That's a character, and it's going, you should believe in Muhammad because he's got the strength of 30 men injected into him. And the mole's just telling everyone, believe in Muhammad,
That's pretty good, man.
AP, in the debate, asked the question, if Jesus and Muhammad were alive today, which one would be in prison for their actions and conduct?
That's a nice question.
Christianity is based. Look at the channel name. Stalker Sadiq of New York City. At least he admitted that Christianity is based.
Do you see Ijaz the other day made another post again? They keep doing this thing now, and I think it's going to be related to one of the debates that I'm going to have, which is that he made this post 2 days ago. Jesus was a Muslim. And I only saw that today, that he made that post again. But they keep doing that. It's just they have these ridiculous lines that they have to keep saying over and over again. As dumb as they are and as untrue as they are, they just keep saying them because that's all they can do. And they also want to use it as an argument, as an argument for Islam. Yeah. They have been using it as an argument for Islam for the longest time now in different places throughout the West and among Christians and all that. It is time to tackle that very firmly as well.
Jesus was a Muslim?
Yeah.
We could do it, man. That one's easy because all the arguments are based on a fallacy. It's called the fallacy.
I made 2 videos about that in the past. One was I think both of them have like over 500,000 views by now or something. But still, I think we need to deal a final blow to that whole issue.
Yeah, I made a super dope video about that, and it's called something like "When They Tell You Jesus Was a Muslim." But yeah, it is. I mean, think about this. When they defend it, it's always based on a fallacy. It's called the fallacy of the undistributed middle, which is easier to understand what the fallacy is just by giving examples. So example would be something simple like cats are mammals. This dog is a mammal. Therefore, this dog is a cat. Okay, that's stupid, right? That's stupid reasoning. Watch God Logic in Times Square. Adam Saleh comes up to him, but Jesus had a beard. Muslims have beards. It was that level, right? It's called the undistributed middle because you have to distribute the middle term. Anyway, if you were to say only Muslims have beards, Jesus had a beard, then you'd have it. But just saying Muslims have beards, Jesus had a beard, the argument doesn't work unless it's only Muslims who have beards. Just like Jesus prayed with his forehead to the ground. Muslims pray with their foreheads to the ground. Therefore, Jesus is a Muslim. That's the fallacy of the undistributed middle. And if your entire argument is based on a logical fallacy that you would find in any logic textbook.
You keep saying their argument is based.
Yes, it's based. It's based on a fallacy. Hey, here you go. What is your elevator pitch on why Islam is dangerous? Most of the time when talking to an uneducated person, you only get a couple of minutes before their liberal sensibilities shut their brain down and resort to Islamophobia. It must be efficient.
I don't know much about elevators.
Yeah, why am I going to talk about this on an elevator, man? Leave those elevators alone. No, Daniel, if I were to bring something up, I would say Islam calls for the violent subjugation of the entire world. It calls for the subjugation of Jews and Christians and forces us to be second-class citizens called dhimmis, and we have to pay tribute money. Everyone else is given the option of converting and dying. And again, this is commanded for the entire world. The natural response of your nice friend who is about to shut down his or her reasoning ability is, but I know peaceful Muslims who don't do any of that stuff. Then you point out Islam is not, has never been, and never will be defined by your nice Muslim friend. It's defined by Allah and Muhammad, and that's where the claims come from. And I would just point out the fact that there are peaceful Muslims who don't want to do any of this, that doesn't make it better. That makes it more dangerous. Because if all Islam were where a bunch of people wanted to kill you, that would be easy to deal with. It's hard to deal with because you've got peaceful Muslims. We're going, what? They're peaceful Muslims. So why are we gonna have a problem with Islam? It makes it more of a problem, not less of a problem. Yeah. So I'd point out something like that. Salam al-Masih. God bless you both. Yeshua Akbar. Thank you. It's One Way Apologetics,
Indeed.
Chris. Do a song with the voice of Zakir Naik. Impossible.
I actually started working on something like that long before I got into the whole AI thing. I started mixing it and doing it myself a long time ago. And it was just about, it was called Medical Doctor.
Oh, and we also had, someone made a song. Who was that? That wasn't Sal. That was, man, my brain is fried. I can't remember channels that I've been following for years. Spinnin' Remixes. Spinnin' Remixes, I think, made a song with the eat pig, behave like pig. You eat pig, you behave like pig.
Yeah.
But that was funny because this is Zakir Naik. I'm a medical doctor. And he goes, and there's a scientific thing.
The scientific
You
thing.
eat pig, you behave like pig. It's like, oh, there's a scientific thing, eh? What an idiot, man. What an idiot. They're all, oh, well, they're so powerful. This is Dawa, guys. Muhammad would be the type of customer that accepts terms and conditions only to later sue over the things he already accepted. Yeah, that does sound like him. Imagine actually being Muslim and seeing the idiocy of the Quran and Hadith and trying to defend the undefendable. Do they want to be deceived? I know Momo Hijab just abuses people, but the rest of them?
Yes, they want to be deceived.
This is actually the biggest problem is that they've just been trained. They hate you if you tell them the truth. They hate you if you tell them the truth. If you lie to them, they love you. If you tell them the truth, they hate you. And I don't just mean from us. Like, we tell them the truth about things they've been told all their lives. We tell them the truth and they hate us for it. But guess what? They'll hate even one of their guys who tells them the truth. Yasser Qadi has spoken the truth twice to them. Hey guys, this whole narrative about how we've got all, we understand this whole process of the Quran and its preservation and so on. Holes in the narrative. What happened? They lost their minds after him, and he spent years trying to redeem himself. And then we get to 2025, and it's, oh, yeah, actually, you think the Quran's got problems. What about the Hadith? Oh, my goodness. No one at the scholarly level takes us seriously. And what happened? Guess what? He's right. Guys, read what actual academics say about Hadith methodology. It's like a stupid joke to them. They think it's ridiculous what actual historians say about it. And so what happened? He told Muslims the truth. Guys, historians do not take this seriously. They think this is a joke. And then, how dare you? We declare war on you. But if you lie to them, guys, we have Hadith methodology. It's so powerful. Everyone thinks it's the best method ever. And all the kuffar are all jealous of us. And they go, oh, alhamdulillah, this is the proof. What is this, man? What a sick religion.
You're sick.
The Shroud is Jesus. He has a long nose and he looks cool and Jewish and likable. God bless Israel. Proud evangelical. God bless you all. Well,
God bless you all.
Remains to be seen. We're about to see the debate. Muhammad could have opened a bakery called My Holy Moly Chocolate Sweet Spot. Well, Zoot found his sweet spot. AP and D Wood, curious to know what you think will happen in Western Europe in the next 10 years regarding Islam. What's your quick version, AB?
I think there's a big awakening right now, especially in places like Britain and other places. I would say that there are already indications that the growth that we saw in the last decades has slowed down, and I would say that there will be efforts to push back and to send lots of people back, and I support that very, very much.
Yes, you have political situations like that, ladies and gentlemen, but think about the situation we're in right now. Dawah is collapsing all around us, and people are catching on, and people are showing up to Dawah booths using the arguments and stuff. That's going to accelerate. Dawah guys aren't going to be able to show their faces anymore. And so these are going to be good times. But yeah, my view is Islam's going to turn into a big gang, basically. It's always had that component, but if you can't even argue anymore that this is truth from God, then all you will be at that point is the world's biggest gang. And I think people will get pretty sick of it pretty quickly once it's recognized as such. David, the Muslim response to your God Logic and IP's presence in New York seemed weak. Am I wrong? No, but we have to wonder, why was it so weak? That's just where we're at. The Dawah script does not work on people who know the Dawah script. And the Dawah guys have caught on to the fact that it doesn't work, which is why the vast majority of them still will avoid us in 2025. You still get a couple of guys who think, oh, no, I've got this great point. And that's like Sadiq thinking he's going to show up and just doesn't go well. But guess what? Now it's not going to work, man. They're catching on. In other words, the Dawah guys are right. Do not show up to people who know your arguments and try to use that nonsense. It's not going to work. D1 and AP, keep up the good works, brothers. By the way, where's that Al Zut song? You making an Al Zut song, man?
I'm not making an Al Zut song.
Should make an Al Zut song. Good time to bring up my middle name is Ezra. Is that real, Ash? That should be funny. You should be shouting that from the rooftops. That should be in a video. Hi, my name's Ash, like Ash from the Evil Dead series. But my middle name is Ezra. Now, let's get into this. Not in the way Al Zut got into things, but let's address this topic.
Powerful.
Your opponent wins points for making you say Orthodox Muslim over and over again, but loses them for having such a ridiculous name. That's true.
Ash, which anyway, I'll ask you somewhere else.
Do a Dawah Advent calendar the month of December. Pick a Dawah topic or misrepresented quote each day and explain it. Bonus points if AP is Santa. That's actually not a terrible idea. Dawah Advent calendar. That was funny. Bonus if AP is Santa. Nice. There's actually a video on YouTube by Corey Gill Schuster, wherein he asks Jews in Israel concerning the Ezra thing. Nobody knows what he's on about.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that. But it wasn't. It can be done better, you know. But he asked very few people and spent too much time talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
we could make a video where we just ask lots of people.
Yeah, ask hundreds of
about
people.
this.
Why do you worship
Yeah.
Ithra?
And nobody knows it. So
You know what's messed up is like they're so nice and they're taught not to be mean towards Islam over there, and we'd be like, hey, why do you worship Ezra and believe that he's the son of God? We don't believe that. Oh, are you calling Muhammad a liar and Islam is a lie? No, I'm not saying that. It'd be such a weird situation, man.
yeah, there was a video that I once saw from a rabbi, and he wants to choose his words as wisely as possible. It's like one of those very, very nice, very kind rabbis, and the question is brought up to him, and he's like, he's obviously trying to say that it's complete nonsense, but he's like, it doesn't tell us anything, that we don't really know what it refers to, and so on.
Yep. We've said it before. We get it. You guys have a big Muslim population there. Gotta get along as much as possible. So we'll do the mocking and attacking for you. Happy to do that. Big Rig says, need to stop shaming Mo for his time with the Zoot dudes. It was just his 304 hot girl summer phase. I'm not sure what the 304 means. You know what that means?
No,
I don't either.
but I agree.
Yes, whatever that means, we probably agree. D Wood got me saying pretty messed up every day, and people keep asking where I got that from. Well, we kind of got that from watching Larry David clips from Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Dude, I just saw, because once you start watching clips of something on YouTube, it just keeps recommending them to you. Dude, what I like about that is he's like equal opportunity offender. I'm cool with those shows, right? I don't like the shows where we'll make fun of this one thing because it's safe, but everything else we won't touch that. Like we'll never do anything about Islam. But he actually did it. He had an entire season where he got a fatwa on his head for doing a play about the Salman Rushdie affair. And then he finds out it makes him cooler, and all the babes are attracted to him because now he's got a fatwa on his head. And you had Salman Rushdie going, the fatwa sex is the best sex. And they made it like this big cool thing. Anyway, so that was cool. He was one of the people, he didn't steer away from Islam. But anyway, I saw this clip earlier. It's like seriously messed up, dude. He showed up to a Holocaust museum, and I don't know why, he had lost his shoes and he had to go talk to someone. So he grabbed some shoes out of the shoe display, but then he wanted to keep them. He said they're so comfortable. It's like
it's one of those messed up episodes. I know it's a whole episode about that.
Yeah, you'd think people would flip out about that, but from experience, there are lots of Jews who have like this dark sense of humor about stuff.
Yeah.
And so they'll let him get away with that.
Yeah.
That was like, are you serious? Like, I can imagine like him thinking, you know what I'll do for the next episode? I'm going to show up to a Holocaust museum and I'm going to take a pair of shoes out of the shoe bin because I don't have any shoes. And I'm going to keep them because they're so comfortable. And he shows his buddy. His buddy's like, why are you still wearing them? He's like, they're so comfortable. And the guy goes, that's because they had cobblers back then. We need to bring back cobblers. That was crazy, man. Idris is Ezra. Idris Uzair means assistant, which Metatron was. We are also working behind the scenes. I've debated Christians on Islamic dilemma in a way Sunnis couldn't be prepared. Oh, I'm screenshotting this.
That's a completely stupid theory, which I already dealt with in the past, but which is also worth getting into at some point.
Yeah, not getting into in the way Zut got into Muhammad. But Christians venerate Saint Esdras, and have a feast day for him, which Jews do not. Extra Muslim L on that one. Ooh, you got burned up right after you said it, man.
That is true.
Thank you, Ash. We should have Ash on with us one day.
We should.
After 20 years of listening and watching debates on or about Islam, here's what I say. Islam is indefensible. Only liars or fools will try it. Show me an honest Muslim, and I'll show you an ex-Muslim. This is very rude and Islamophobic. We do not approve. So, YouTube censors, we did not confirm this.
Very Islamophobic.
And we don't even know what confirm means, according to Daniel Hikikachu. So how could we confirm it? If we said we confirmed it, that wouldn't mean we confirm it, apparently.
What does it mean?
A lot of Hollywood male stars also have beards, and I don't mean facial hair. Muslims have beards. Muhammad had a lot of beards. My cat is God, all hail Dark Empress Luna. What the heck is this nonsense? I have to get banned for that nonsense. I fell out with a close friend of 20 years from a very nominal Muslim family because I told her I read the Quran and found it angering and bemusing. That's another interesting feature
That's very rude.
that you hear from lots of people. You can have people from just completely nominal Muslim families, don't take it seriously, don't go to the mosque, but if you criticize Islam, they still dial it up. They still like dial it up instantly and are ready to never talk to you again over this. It's weird. AP, can you make the song Tequila, but instead it's Tequila? I did that for my video on Tequila years ago. I had you can't do it anymore. They're more sensitive about music clips, but I played like 15 seconds of the song at the beginning. And right when it hit that, it cuts to me and I go, Tequila, and is an important topic, and went through that.
I don't even know that song.
Oh, classic song, because like the only thing they say in the entire song is tequila. But that's a jam, man. It is hard to do songs, although I think you could get away. Here's the thing. You can get along, you're allowed to make parodies of songs and even use their beats and stuff like that if it's a parody. But would it really qualify as a parody if there's only one word in the entire song and the rest of the song is exactly the same, but instead of tequila, you say tequila? I don't know if that would count as a parody. Let's see. Someone told me there is a Seinfeld-esque and yada, yada, yada moment in Bukhari 50:38 where Muhammad forgets verses. Is that what it really means? Yeah, I don't know about the yada, yada, yada. Yeah, there's a Seinfeld episode with the yada, 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 where instead of talking about sex, they just say, and, went back to the place and yada, yada, yada. And then they have a big discussion about whether you can get away with saying yada, yada, yada like that. Let me see this. 50:38. This an important hadith passage, but I'm not paying attention to the yada yada.
I'm paying no attention. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, you do have the such and such verses of such and such surahs. I will ask. Hey, bring this up again, Eric. When I have Jai and DOC, they can break down the Arabic. But yeah, it says Allah's messenger heard a man reciting the Quran at night and said, "May Allah bestow His mercy on him, as he has reminded me of such and such verses of such and such surahs, which I was caused to forget." That hadith is so important for other reasons. I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of the such and such verses of such and such surahs. But I mean, think about this. May Allah. So Allah's messenger heard a man reciting the Quran at night. So he hears him. Ooh, hey, who's this reciting the Quran? And said, may Allah bestow His mercy on him, as he has reminded me of such and such verses of such and such surahs, which I was caused to forget. When Allah wants to abrogate something, He causes the Muslim community to forget the verses, right? So Allah, that's what's so confusing. If Allah causes you to forget it, Allah is abrogating it and He's wiping it out of your memory. But here's this guy who remembers the verses and is still reciting them. Allah couldn't overpower this dude's memory. I think it was Ubay ibn Ka'b. But Allah couldn't overpower this guy's memory, and Muhammad's like, thank you. Allah made me forget that, but thank you. Now you've reminded me. It's like, wait, dude, if Allah wanted to abrogate this and caused you to forget it, why are you happy that this guy reminded you of it? That's what's so weird, man. Seriously weird. But it's funnier if it is this yada, 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 such and such verses, blah, blah, blah. I want to see what that really is in Arabic. So yeah, we'll check that out when, matter of fact, I'll screenshot that and bring it up to Jai. I'd trust a random felon to protect a woman before I trust any UK cop. Oh yeah, I said that before.
That's pretty rude.
What's the difference between... I would trust a random convict to have young Bob's back if these guys are harassing him more than I trust the UK, who's just like, oh, is he offending you by raising objections at Speaker's Corner? Supposedly the bastion of freedom of speech in the UK. What a sick stuff, man. If only someone had warned them, guys. If only someone had warned them. What's the difference between... This is funny. I'm screenshotting this. It's a good joke. What's the difference between 30 burly black men and a joke? Muhammad couldn't take a joke. I'm stealing that one. Hey, AP, what if you put on a giant fake mole to prove you're a prophet and claim the Quran was corrupted and was originally Trinitarian? They'd have to believe you.
I could do that. I could totally do that.
Oh, for the 304. Put 304 in a calculator and turn it upside down. Okay, I get it. That's what it means. So it's this childish stuff from when kids were in elementary school. Oh, look, I can put 8008 and it looks like boob. God bless you both. Thank you. Well, here we go. AP, your knowledge is lacking. Use promo code ALZUT to get 2 free months on Dean Buddy. Hey, we need something where there's a promo code called ALZUT. Use the promo code ALZUT. Would love to see you guys do a stream with Bosch Foston. We should do that. Haven't heard from Bosch in a long time. I mean, I see him on like Twitter and stuff. Hey guys, really love your job, especially against Islam. David, I'm seriously thinking about doing something similar with religion here in Brazil. Should I attack the logic, the founder? God bless you all. Well, that's if you're talking about doing the same stuff in Brazil, one, you need to, because what have we been saying? They're looking for pockets of ignorance, and now they are turning their attention to South and Central America and stuff like that because they haven't had to deal with the Dawa, and so they're not ready. They're not ready for it. So yeah, that's massively needed in South and Central America. So if you want to do something, pick any of our best points or best arguments and start making them in Portuguese, Spanish, all the relevant languages. Since people are throwing around song ideas, can you do Why Don't You Come With Me, Little Girl, on a magic donkey ride? I've thought of that a long time ago. Yeah, the magic donkey ride. I like that one. I was just wondering if we could do all zoot with that one. I love AP's catchphrases, namely, that's pretty rude.
That's pretty rude.
Delivery. That is rude. Muslima ladies, we're undeniable. Oh, that's that. Who's that? We're undeniable. Daisy Dukes Barca's on top. I remember that. It's the worst song ever. We the people need an El Zut song. We do need an El Zut song. That is true. Plant is greater than butt. Anyway.
Didn't already Sal make an Al Zut song? I think he made an Al Zut song or something.
Al Zut. I think we need like 50 Al Zut songs.
Zut's gonna give it to you.
All right. Wow. We just went through a bunch of super chats here at the beginning. I don't know why I keep doing
Didn't you just say that this time you want to look at the video instead of going?
Yeah, and then here's the thing, and then I'm looking and I say, oh, there are a few super chats. Let me just knock those out. Not in the way Al Zut knocked out Muhammad, but just go through those couple. But then there ends up being a bunch of them. All right, you ready to check out this debate, man?
No, I'm already tired.
It's Piers Morgan, guys. Piers Morgan. I bet the name Pierce has special meaning for Muhammad. But Piers Morgan, so apparently like 90% of the time, he just has people on there screaming about Jews in Israel. But then he had on Wes Huff one time to talk about stuff. And here he has on a couple of guys to debate the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin, just out of nowhere. Weird stuff. So anyway, I pulled that up and I cut out the 50 commercials that he has in there.
Hang on. Why did you cut out the commercials?
Hang on. Hey, we should just watch it and like interrupt it like every 10 seconds and go, hang on. Let's try it and see how this works. Ready? All right, so guys, got a Shroud of Turin debate. Let's see.
The Shroud of Turin is one of the most studied and
Hang on. Or, it'd be funny if the guys started arguing, but they argue like Cenk Yogurt and what's her face and stuff like that, and Mohammed Hijab. Yeah. That would be awesome if they were arguing about the Shroud of Turin like that. I looked at the comments and people were like, "Wow, it's so weird having a respectful debate where people actually let each other speak and stuff on Piers Morgan." It is weird. All right.
Just artifacts in human history. The 14-foot linen cloth bears the image of a bearded man. Many Christians believe it lay on the top of the body of Jesus Christ after his crucifixion, as the likeness, the contours, and the wound marks to match. Researchers have discredited that explanation, arguing it may be a scorch or a painting. And a high-profile study released last week
It's not a painting.
used 3D modeling tools to determine the shroud may have rested atop a statue, not a person. So are we any closer to understanding whether the shroud is proof of Christ or a medieval hoax? To debate all this, I'm joined by two scholars with very different interpretations of the significance of all this. Pastor and founder of the Christian Thinkers Society, Dr.
Christian Thinkers Society?
What? What do you have a
I'm
problem?
just saying, there's been a Muslim Thinker Society and like an Atheist Thinker Society. Why are you going to call your Christian society that same played out name?
Why are you copying them?
Jeremiah Johnston and Dr.
Who's this guy? He said Jeremiah Johns. Did he say Johnson or Johnston? That name
He
sounds
said
familiar.
Johnston. Johnstone.
Oh, okay. No, this is why it sounded familiar. Jeremiah Johnson's a 1972 American Western film with Robert Redford. Okay. I may have never heard of this guy. I may
You're saying
be
this guy's a
thinking.
film?
Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, PhD, MA, MDiv, BA, New Testament scholar, pastor, author, nationally syndicated radio host, Bible teacher, and apologist. Okay. He's got a bunch of books. So I don't know. I don't know if I was thinking his name sounded familiar because of the movie or because I've heard of him before. I don't know. But here we go. Looks like a nice guy.
Joseph Asseta, who's a member of the Shroud of Turin Research Project. Well, welcome to both of you. Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, let me start with you first of all. For people who are tuning into this, look, I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, I'm very aware of the history of the Shroud of Turin. But for those who aren't, just give me a very brief summary of what we're talking about. What is the Shroud of Turin?
Which one is West Half?
Absolutely. First, Pierce.
What?
Which one is West Half?
Yo, West Huff, where you at? Hey, I was thinking about the other day. I was thinking about it was after Sadiq said to called AP white boy, and I said, you know who else was white? And then people yelled Muhammad, and so that was cool that people are familiar with that. But I was thinking that's one of the videos I should remake. Muhammad, the white prophet with black slaves, should remake that. But at the beginning, I think, if I recall correctly, because I made a bunch of jokes, I think at the beginning I said, who's the whitest prophet of all time? Joseph Smith, right? Wrong. What if I told you there's a prophet who's so white he makes Joseph Smith look like Wesley Snipes? But I was thinking it'd be funnier if the joke is, Muhammad's so white he makes Wesley Huff look like Wesley Snipes. I think that would be better because it's two Wesleys. It's a double Wesley effect. And Wesley's already such a funny, like, silly name.
What? Why? Why do you have to attack Wesleys now, man?
I don't know. They brought this on themselves by being named Wesley.
It's your fault.
Such a joy to be on
Yeah. You don't like it? You don't like me making fun of your name? Get a better name. Talking to
Change
you,
your
Orthodox Lips Muslim. Change your name to something else if you don't like it.
program. You're a fellow seeker of truth. I'm a huge fan of yours and Uncensored, so delighted to be joining you. The Shroud of Turin is the most researched, as
Pierce certainly likes being praised.
you said, artifact in the world. It's also the most lied about artifact in the world, interestingly enough. And I think that's because it does something that no other artifact does. It gives testimony to the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And nothing outside of Scripture does that. And I'll just say right here at the beginning, Pierce, I did my PhD on the physical bodily resurrection of Jesus. I studied in Oxford in the Griffith Papyrology Lab. I've published 250,000 words on the resurrection, and I used to be a complete skeptic of the Shroud.
It's interesting when the original team went over to study it. Apparently, they all thought it was going to be like complete fake. And it was like, hey, when we go over there and we put this thing under the microscope, we're going to see that it's paint, and we're going to be able to show everyone that it's paint. And most of them, after examining it, concluded that it's authentic. Some of them thought authentic crucifixion victim, not necessarily Jesus, and so on. But then later on, you had things like the carbon dating and so on. Just in the name of Forthrightness, ladies and gentlemen. I am not convinced that that is a burial cloth of Jesus. I'm open to it. I'm not saying it's not or anything. I'm just saying, well, it's weird. Here's how probabilistic or Bayesian reasoning would work. You have your sort of prior probability. So before looking into evidence, before looking at the evidence, how probable do you think this is? So if you said, hey, we've got the burial cloth of Jesus, well, there's been lots of kinds of forgeries and stuff over there, and it would be pretty interesting if you actually preserved the burial cloth of Jesus for 2,000 years. But you'd kind of have to have a ton of evidence for something like that, right? Because that would be a low prior probability. In other words, before you showing me the evidence for this thing, I'd be like, come on, you've got that. That could be anything. That could be anything. With that said, there's all sorts of interesting features about it. So I'm undecided, but I am not convinced that. So anyway, that's kind of why I'm. Let's see what they get. Let's see what these guys got.
Hang on. I just have one question. So my question here is when it comes to the Shroud of Turin, right? I don't exactly. So my question is, I see that that some people are extremely passionate about this, extremely passionate in believing or hanging on to the belief that this is absolutely authentic, and having almost having a kind of like a religious devotion to that idea that it is authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not battling against that. I'm just trying to understand why is it such a huge deal? Is it just because it is like it is considered a direct artifact linking to Jesus?
Well,
and the death and resurrection, or the death, or what exactly? Why exactly do some people consider it such a huge deal?
Well, here's the issue. If it's fake, it hurts nothing. It's okay. It doesn't hurt us at all, right? Jesus rose from the dead. If Jesus rose from the dead, he either rose from the dead or not, and you don't need the Shroud of Turin for that sort of thing. So if it's not authentic, doesn't hurt Christianity even slightly. It would only hurt you if somehow you based your belief in Jesus on the Shroud of Turin or something like that, which I think might be a little weird. But anyway, so if it's not authentic, it doesn't hurt Christianity in any way. If it's authentic, the people who argue for it argue that the image was produced by some sort of burst of radiation, and it's the only cloth from that time where you actually have this, like an image on it. And so it's like you have a photograph of the resurrection. In other words, Jesus, at his resurrection, a burst of radiation comes forth and leaves an image on this piece of cloth. So if it's authentic, that gets really, really interesting. And it would be something that's actually like was used to wrap the body. It's like if they actually found the cross or something like that Jesus was nailed to, would be like if you had the cross that Jesus was nailed to, you'd have people reverencing it and so on like that. I wouldn't. I would just, I think it's interesting or something like that. I'd want to see it, make a video about it. But there wouldn't be a lot of evidential value, and unless you're talking to Muslims or something who deny the crucifixion. But everyone believes that Jesus died by crucifixion, that he was nailed to a cross and so on. So it's not like finding the cross would confirm that. We already have massive historical evidence for that. It would just be people would think it's very interesting. And you would have people who reverence objects who would have a lot of reverence for that. The Shroud of Turin, if it's actually like a photograph of the resurrection, it was caused by radiation or something like that. That seems like it would have a lot of evidential value. Like, okay, this is we got a picture of Jesus as he's being raised from the dead. That would be interesting.
That makes sense.
But we'll see what these guys got.
But I live by a motto, I learn from everyone, but I don't let anyone think for me. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I began reading these very recent scientific studies that are truly breaking news that I had a big change of mind.
Nice.
Hang on. Isn't that weird? It's like I can't even get my mind around someone finishing their thought without someone else, either Pierce or another guest, interrupting him. That is weird.
How did you not interrupt him at this point? It's interesting.
Very weird.
Talk about the Shroud itself. How big is it? What do we think it's made of? What kind of material? And where physically is it now?
Absolutely. I've been with the Shroud. It's in Turin, Italy, in the beautiful Piedmont district of northern Italy. It's in the St. Giovanni Cathedral in Turin, Italy. Pilgrims can go see
Say it right. It's the Santa Giovanni.
Giovanni.
today. It's held in a reliquary. This is really cool, Pierce. The company in Turin, Italy, that builds all of the facilities for the International Space Station actually built what's called the reliquary, the box that the Shroud is preserved in. There's two huge enemies of the Shroud today because we do believe that it's a 2,000-year-old artifact. That's light and oxygen. I just was with my friend Enrico, the chemist, who twice a year changes out the 99% argon gas mixed with 1% oxygen to preserve the Shroud. The Shroud is fascinating in that we have hundreds of burial shrouds from the land of Israel that wrapped Jewish corpses. We have only one shroud that has the image of a crucified man that corresponds with all of the realities that we read in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Josephus, by the way, of how Jesus was brutally crucified under the hands of Pontius Pilate. And so that is my area of specialty. So if it's not a hoax, what is it? And without a doubt, because I'm not irrational, I believe that the Shroud belongs to the historical Jesus.
How are you just going to say you're not irrational? You know who says, you know what kind of person says he's not irrational?
Irrational people?
That's what I was thinking. It's like the Quran constantly saying, Muhammad, you're not crazy. You're not crazy, Muhammad. You're not crazy. Hey, I'm not irrational. I'm not irrational over here. No, this guy seems like a good spokesperson for
rational people.
So we got the cloth. We got the cloth. He said we got the cloth. We've got a number of these cloths that have been used for burial, but only one with this image on it. Oh, yeah, what he was saying there is the enemies are light and air, something like that. This was a while back. I studied the Shroud a bit, but it was like over 20 years ago. And it was interesting. They said the image has been fading for centuries. Like whenever you think it was made, the image has been fading over time. And they said it was something like within another 50 years, if they hadn't taken steps to preserve it, the image would have been completely gone. So it's kind of interesting that, when you look at photographs of it, you actually have to look at the photographic negative. Then the Shroud of Turin is the negative. And if you then look at the negative, then all of a sudden it looks like a photograph. But it would have been a much clearer image in the past. So that's an interesting feature, that it's fading, and they kind of caught it right before it would have been lost forever. Matter of fact, the guy, this became an issue because the dude who originally took pictures of it, it just, if you look at the Shroud, it just looks like some brown staining on a cloth. It's not until the guy took photographs of it, and then when he saw the negative, and he goes, "Oh, the negative looks exactly like a photograph."
Yeah,
and that's when a lot of people got really interested in it. Elvis was actually reading a book on the Shroud of Turin on the toilet as where he died.
Really?
That was the book he had in his hand. Yeah, it was on the Shroud of Turin.
Wow, that's funny.
It's in my video about Elvis.
How big is it?
That's what Muhammad asked. Why? Why do you have to do this, man? I'm trying to do a serious show on a serious topic, and it's like they planned this, man. Netanyahu clearly planned everything, and constantly kissing. They clearly planned like half their video just so we could do al-Zut jokes yesterday. Anyway, it was weird.
14 feet, 4 inches long. Pierce, I had to get this too. It covers a body like a pita, okay? It would wrap.
See that, guys? That's when you look at a photographic negative. You can't see any of that. It just looks like some brown coloring on this. All of a sudden you look at a photographic negative and it looks like a picture of a body. Wild stuff.
under the body, over the head, and then drape back towards the front of the body all the way down. And that's the Greek word that we get senden from. And that shows up in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then that singular wrapped Jesus's body. According to Jewish burial traditions, if the Sanhedrin condemned a criminal to death, it was on the Sanhedrin to take care of their burial. They were not given honorable burial. They had just been crucified. They were given proper burial. What do we see? We see that Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus, two members of the Sanhedrin, they ask Pontius Pilate for the body of Jesus. They have to go quickly. He has to be buried before sundown. It's a high Sabbath the next day. They wrap Jesus's body and they place it in a tomb approximately pierced 200 feet from where he would have been crucified just outside the city. And then it is at that point, 39 hours later, that a radiation event occurs. And we believe that the best explanation, remember, David Hume says wise men choose probabilities. The
Hume?
best explanation after 102 scientific disciplines have spent 600,000 hours studying this is that at the moment of Jesus's physical bodily resurrection, a radiation event occurs that leaves this incredible image on the cloth at the moment of Jesus's resurrection. So we're really not talking about a death cloth anymore, Pierce. We're talking about a resurrection cloth.
Here's a guys, there I can see in the chat there are people who studied the Shroud of Turin and so on. Again, I did this. It was a while back. There are all sorts of interesting features about the Shroud, tons of them, with the interesting features of the image, interesting features about they can trace where this thing has been over the centuries based on things like pollen from local plants and so on. They can trace where this thing's been, rock dust. Rock dust is only, and this particular rock dust is only found here in and around Jerusalem and things like that. There's all sorts of interesting features like that. For me, the most interesting thing, not even like the radiation or the image, there is the thing about the image on the shroud, and that it's really, really thin, which you don't get from like paint. Paint will soak into stuff. Fluids will like blood will soak into stuff. The image is just like on like the total surface layer. But what's interesting for me is the shroud, whether you think it was made 4 or 5 centuries 4 or 5, 6 centuries ago, whatever. I think it's the 1300s where they actually can trace it back to like where they know it was. And then you have references to a cloth with an image of Jesus, but they're not sure they're not sure it's referring to the same one, but you have references going way back to like a burial cloth of Jesus. But here's what's interesting. Whenever this thing was made, whether it's 1st century or the 14th century or something like that, you couldn't have planned. No one could have planned for this thing to be like a photographic negative. In other words, whatever you're doing to make this cloth, let's suppose, hey, I just want to put some brown coloring on there. Like, how would you know or anticipate that at, centuries later, someone's going to have this thing that's a camera. They're going to take a picture of this, and all of a sudden, this thing's going to look like a photograph. Like, that is mind-boggling that actually happened. In other words, if it was just some accidental image that's formed, or it was something used for a play, that's one of the theories. It was made for a play about the resurrection of Jesus and so on. Like, how does it end up like so absolutely mind-bogglingly amazing, like a photograph centuries later by accident? That's the weird part. Like, you couldn't have planned for that. So you had to be doing something else, and then it just accidentally looks like a photograph if you look at a photographic negative. That's wild stuff to me.
So you're saying it's real?
Nope, I'm saying that is a piece of evidence. That's how it works. So again, I would assign a low prior probability. You could reach some threshold where I would say that's one of the things that raises the probability. I haven't seen anything that raises the probability enough for me to say, yes, I believe that this thing is clearly authentic.
Huh. So you're saying it's real? Okay.
Maybe this guy has a bunch more based stuff he's about to say.
Fascinating. Okay, let's bring in Dr. Joseph Aceta. Now, you interested...
Why can't you just say fascinating when other guests are speaking? It's always, hang on!
...participated in an on-site examination of the Shroud of Turin. and you believe it's of 14th century origin, which is around the time the Shroud came into public existence. So tell me, first of all, about your examination of the Shroud and why you've determined that you believe it's only from the 14th century.
Well, I think my belief has to be qualified a little bit. First of all, I am a Christian. I'm a practicing Christian, so I have no axe to grind here. And I did examine the Shroud firsthand in 1978. I was a member of the team that was doing infrared spectroscopy and infrared imaging.
Oh, that's interesting. So this guy was on the original team, so he's been there for a while. So I guess this is I think there was only one or two who walked away saying that it's not authentic. So this is one of the guys who walked away saying it's not authentic. Everyone
get better sound quality for this guy.
Yeah, apparently he doesn't have a mic. He's just going with his computer. But hey, you've got a legend here, man. This guy was part of the original Shroud research team, man. Send this guy a mic.
He can't be the Shroud himself if he doesn't have a proper mic. What is this?
Okay. And my impression, of course, at that time was it's truly an extraordinary object. I would not disagree with anything Jeremiah said.
You catch what he just said, guys? He said, my impression at that time was this is an extraordinary object, right? So it's like, it's interesting. Even the guys who don't believe it's authentic are still like, this is something crazy going on here. So
here a minute ago, it is truly extraordinary. But my position, I have to clarify it, is that if the Shroud is 14th century, then I think there's an explanation on how it was done. I wrote a very detailed paper on the circumstances of the 14th century, the historical and geographical circumstances, and also the optical properties of Shroud all match up to a certain paradigm using wood printing. And the recent paper by Cicero kind of underscores that. It's complementary in a sense. Now remember what I said. If it's 14th century, I will leave the controversy about the date to the current discussion that's going on between a number of members of this community regarding its authenticity. I think that there are some issues associated with the date. I think they're legitimate issues, but in my view, at the current time, the evidence of the Shroud's authenticity doesn't really meet the rigorous standards of scientific inquiry. That's basically where I stand right now.
All right, so guys, I remember reading the article. It was in the journal Thermochemica Acta way back in the day. But the response, so you had, and I think it was 1988, they had the 3 separate laboratories all date the Shroud using carbon dating. And they all came up with a date like in the 14th century or something like that. Then you had, a little over 20 years ago, you had a chemist, and he said that the fragments that were used for the carbon dating were actually parts that were later added because it was damaged in a fire. In other words, these were later things and so on. And he said if you actually tested the center portion, you'd get a different date because they've rewoven places on it because of damage over the centuries and so on. I don't know if that's all correct or if that stood the test of time, but that was the response back then. And he was saying, hey, test something in the middle. And he even said, yeah, there's going to be a problem if you people aren't going to let you cut out a piece of the middle. And he said, but various fibers and so on that have been taken from it as samples and so on, if you were actually willing to, because you have to destroy stuff to do the carbon testing. So if you have a little piece of it and so on, he said there is enough material that's been taken from the more of the middle of the Shroud that if you were willing to use it all in carbon dating, you could actually get a different date. And in that, he actually argued that evidence from some of the other fibers was consistent with a much older date of the Shroud. So, but we'll see.
Okay.
I have to say, these guys are really good at not interrupting each other.
Jeremiah, I suppose the obvious question for me is, why did it only emerge in the 14th century? Why, if it's so obviously historically important? Why did it not emerge earlier? And given the enormous time scale between the event and the discovery of this shroud, do you understand why people are so skeptical?
Oh, 100%. I understand why I used to be a skeptic myself. And by the way, I have incredible respect for Dr. Joe Aceta on this wonderful panel with us. He also served in the armed forces and has a Defense Department clearance. I mean, he is a very well-respected scholar. And Joe, I appreciate you so much. I think Joe and Pierce.
What'd you say?
That's nice.
Yeah, it's weird. Guys are being. This doesn't even seem like Piers Morgan.
You're supposed to be fighting, man. What is this?
Yeah, start yelling at each other. Come on. Gotta go full Jerry Springer on Piers Morgan.
And all three of us agree on a lot more than we may think that we do. But for the benefit of the audience, because when you get Shroud red-pilled like I've been, because I've gone from this is a...
It's called Shroud red-pilled now.
He should have said Shroud-pilled.
Yeah, Shroud-pilled. You should start that up, AP. I've been Shroud-pilled.
Complete, a very...
Unlike Muhammad, who got Zut-pilled.
Oxford highbrow response to I deal with evidence, this, keep me away from that weird relic, to now becoming this defender based on the evidence. One of the key indicators of why some people are skeptical of the Shroud is based on a 1988 radiocarbon dating that was very famous. Piers, you probably remember this from your journalistic career. It was on the front of every newspaper 37 years ago that they wrote on a chalkboard that based on the radiocarbon dating they had done, and remember it was supposed to be 7 labs, only 3 labs, more about that in a second, that the Shroud dated from 1260 to 1390. They wrote that down on the chalkboard and they sat down, they crossed their arms, and that was that. I just spoke at the International Shroud of Turin conference at the St. Augustine Institute in St. Louis, and I met a French scholar by the name of Tristan. And get this, Piers, this is what's fascinating to me, and what I love about your program Uncensored, because we have to get to the truth. We have
this guy's a good communicator in that he's constantly complimenting everyone.
Buttering.
Yeah.
Nice.
Buttering them up, not the way, of course, that all Zut buttered up Muhammad, but in a good way. This is good communication tactics, ladies and gentlemen.
Not in a Zut way, but in a good way.
Said he was talking to a French scholar named Tristan. What is Tristan adding to this? I'm not familiar with this Tristan guy, so this could be potentially new, interesting stuff.
To be truth addicts. And what I learned from Tristan is he did the equivalent of a Freedom of Information Act. It took him 8 years. He told me all about this. And after 8 years of trying, in 2017, the British Library finally released the raw data of that carbon dating from 1988. And this is what Dr. Aceta has rightly pointed out. This has thrown into question this entire radiocarbon dating, so much so I actually brought the Oxford article from 2019. This is the Journal of Archaeometry from Oxford University, where these scholars point out that the sample that they used, Piers, which is the top left of the shroud, they didn't use the middle of the shroud, they didn't use the middle of the heart or the body. They took the fringe. They took the one spot that the STURP team members encouraged them not to test. And that this article shows that the sample is not representative of the entire shroud. It's not a homogeneous sample.
So that's interesting. So again, I read the article in Thermochemica Acta, which would have been like 2004 or something like that. So, but he's saying 2019, they're examining the fabric and showing that the fabric that was used, the linen that was used for the carbon dating was not the same as in the rest of the image. So that would be interesting.
So therefore, they're saying those results need to be thrown out. In other words, if you're skeptical about the shroud, we understand that's okay to be skeptical, because if this is what we think it is, it should stand up to the greatest scrutiny. But don't base your skepticism on the radiocarbon dating from 1988. We have a lot better ways of dating the shroud now, such as the WAXIS, the wide-angle X-ray scattering, Piers, which showed that the shroud has been getting old for 2,000 years from the Institute of Crystallography. There are other...
I remember that when it came out, but that was because it actually circulated in articles, just in regular news sources and so on, that they were arguing that this is way older than the carbon dating suggested.
fascinating things that I'd love to get to if we have time. So the Shroud does appear before Leary, France. To answer your direct question, Pierce, sorry, I wanted to give context to that. The Shroud was not always known as the Shroud of Turin, though. So my area of specialty, remember, Pierce, a PhD knows a lot about a little. The little I know a lot about as a Christian historian is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, okay? And I understand how historical documentation works, all right? And one thing about the Shroud, and I always use this analogy because we're in football season now, American football, that is. I'm a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan, but they were not always known as the Kansas City Chiefs. They were first known, where I live, as the Dallas Texans. The Shroud of Turin has been known historically.
What?
Hang on. If you're going to go on a global, universal platform and give an example, never, ever give an example of American football. Nobody
He's
knows
talking to Pierce Morgan. Pierce is like, what is he even talking about? Hang on. Well, we don't even know what you're talking about. Is that? Which football club is that? Kansas City Chiefs. That's not a football club. How come I've never heard of it before? Yeah. So sounds like he's bringing up a name change for a football team, real football, because it sounds like he's going to be responding to what Pierce said about how come people how did this suddenly emerge in the 14th century? Why weren't Christians talking about this the entire time? My goodness, we've got the burial cloth of Jesus. So it sounds like he's going to point out name change for it.
Other things. After all, it didn't even end up in Turin until 1578, which was a political maneuver, make no mistake, by the Savoy family to centralize their power in Italy and coming from France. It was known as the Mandylion, the image of Edessa. Eusebius discusses it in.
That's interesting because I've heard of the sudarium. That's a different cloth. It was just a head cloth. Now, what's interesting is the blood stains on this, and the sudarium they can trace back definitely, I think, to like the 6th century that they've had this from, and that's just absorbing blood. But what's interesting is the blood stain patterns on the sudarium match the blood stain patterns on the Shroud of Turin. So, if it was
what's the relation to the image of Edessa here again?
What?
How is that related?
The sudarium, or what he just said, what I was not familiar with, the millennium? Hang on. He's saying that, yeah, he's saying that.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think he's saying they had reference to this and it was just called something different. And he said, I think that's why he said it only came to Turin in, what did he say, 15 something, 73, whatever. Yeah. He's thinking, well, Shroud of Turin. Why weren't they talking about the Shroud of Turin? Because it would have been called something else. It wasn't even in Turin. They would have called it something else back then. So it sounds like he's saying that, but yeah, I wasn't familiar with that word. Let me back up. What did he say?
I am familiar with the Mandylion a little bit, which is the image of Edessa, which is it's very well known in Orthodoxy because it has great significance in iconography and all that. But yeah, let's listen.
About the Shroud, and I always use this analogy because we're in football season now, American football, that is.
Why did I have
I'm a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan, but they were not always known as the Kansas City Chiefs. They were first known, where I live, as the Dallas Texans.
Now, hang on.
Shroud of Turin has been known historically as other things. After all, it didn't even end up in Turin until 1578, which was a political maneuver, make no mistake, by the Savoy family to centralize their power in Italy and coming from France. It was known as the Mandylion, the image of Edessa.
People are putting Mandalorian in the chat. That's funny.
Eusebius discusses it in 325 as with a letter to the king of Akbar. I mean, think about that. Eusebius, who's at the Council of Nicaea in 325, that great Christian historian who had amazing sources at his disposal. Also predating, or for the scholars watching, antedating the carbon dating, we have the Hungarian Prey Codex. And Pierce, this is an area that I love studying, is ancient manuscripts. 250 years before the carbon dating, in the Hungarian Prey Codex, there is an image that is obviously handwritten that matches point for point, one for one, the Shroud of Turin, down to the anatomical condition of the body and even the herringbone weave. Can you believe that? It's fascinating.
Okay, that is interesting, guys. So he's saying that you've got the carbon dating, and it gives a date range from, I think he said 1290 or 1280 to 390 or something like that. Gives you a range. But he's saying 250 years before that, we have a drawing and the drawing matches the shroud, suggesting, well, I guess you'd say that whoever's making the shroud, if you think it was some sort of forgery, that they would have been copying this other image. But the more plausible explanation would be it's at least somewhat older than the carbon dating would suggest because someone else drew it before that. If he's correct, and that's a big if.
Okay, Joseph, your response to that?
Hey Pete, you should when you debate, you should act like this guy for once. You're always mean, and you insult people and you call them things like orthodox lips, Muslim, and stuff like that. What if you're like? What if you're like, hey, it's really great here to be with Dean Responds. He's really making some powerful videos, and I really like the way he communicates and stuff. And so I'm really looking forward to this as a great conversation. Let's get into this. Not the way Al Zut got into Muhammad, but you know what I mean.
Maybe I should try it in my next debate. In my debate with Dee's Response, I will do that.
Do that. Dude, be super nice and like this guy. Just listen to this guy over and over again and be like this guy.
Well, admittedly, some of the circumstances around the carbon-14 dating cast a little bit of a cloud over it, specifically because, as already been pointed out, where it was taken from, which was a very bad choice. And secondly, some so-called logistical mishandling. It wasn't quite handled off to right. All of this has casted a cloud, okay, on the data. But I will go on to say that there are very few people around that are competent enough to question the competency of these laboratories. So we have to get back to the question of what was handed to the labs to test, okay? And that's a legitimate concern. Mm-hmm. One of the astonishing things about all of this is that if you look for explanations on why the date came out what it did, okay, you could look to what was handed to the labs was in fact a 14th century piece of cloth mm-hmm. from the patch area or some reweaving that might have taken place. Or secondly, it was randomly contaminated. Now,
so what he just pointed out, guys, if you were suspicious of the carbon dating, you could argue, as Jeremiah Johnston has done, that this was taken from a later reweaving, so the cloth was actually later. Or even if it was the original cloth, you could say that it had been contaminated. So if it's been contaminated from being handled or something like that, or from being in a fire, something like that, I guess the claim would be that this could throw off the carbon dating. But let's see where he's going with this.
All the dates that came up in these three labs are roughly the same. They're 14th century. What is astonishing to me is that given this random contamination, the radiocarbon date turned out to be coincident with the historical date. Now that, to me, is almost a miraculous event, okay? How this random contamination gave rise to a date that's almost totally coincident with its historical date. And for that reason, I have some skepticism about the legitimacy of this cloth.
That was actually important. That was actually an important point, guys. What he's pointing out is you have the carbon dating. And what's your explanation for why the carbon dating is giving a certain date? Well, it's been contaminated, or it was a patch that was rewoven into it, and that's why we're getting this date. And he's pointing out, well, isn't it an amazing coincidence that the date from this contamination just happens to be around the same time that the Shroud of Turin kind of emerges in history? Yeah, you can say other cloths that were it was referred to as other things, but when what we can actually trace it back to, and we know exactly where it was, actually lines up really well with it originating at this time, because that's what the carbon dating on the fragment shows. So he's saying, hey, yeah, you could be skeptical of this and you could be skeptical of this, but isn't it interesting that these two details line up really, really well to give an origin in like the 13th or 14th century?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And we could go on and discuss this in great detail. I don't think we have time for it, frankly.
Oh, we've got time. We got all the time.
Oh, we got as much time as you like. Don't worry about that. Let me come back to Jeremiah. The forensic evidence of it includes wounds consistent with Roman crucifixion practices, including puncture marks in the wrists and heels, hundreds of scourge marks from lead-tipped whips, and more.
That's I'll back that up slightly, but no, I won't. We got this. That's an interesting feature, that the nail marks in the shroud image are through the wrist, whereas around the time it was popular in paintings and so on to put the nails through the hands, because in the Greek it refers to the hands and so on, but the hand in Greek referred to this whole section right here. So in crucifixion they put it through the wrist. If you put it through the hand, it's going to rip out. It's gonna if you put it right through here in your hand, it would the nail would rip right through your skin, and you would not be attached to the cross. So you put it through the wrist, which was extremely painful, but held you in place, and so on. So paintings during this time, they put the nail marks in the hands, but on the shroud, it's actually correct. It's through the wrists.
It's such a messed up practice, man.
It is. It's pretty messed up and brutal.
50 punctures from a brutal crown of thorns. Now, the figure on the shroud has numerous anatomical abnormalities, people have pointed out. The arms, for example, seem freakishly long. The fingers are longer on one hand than the other. The supposition being the figure would have been considered a giant at the time. Men were typically averaging around 5'3". The figure measures 5'10" on one side, 6 feet on the other. Another weird discrepancy. What do you say to that? So clearly there's a lot of compelling evidence it was of a crucifix man, and we can debate about the timing of the shroud and the history, and we've discussed that. But in terms of these abnormalities, what do you say to that?
Absolutely. Pierce, hold my ice cold Coke Zero while I answer these, will you?
Just say beer, man. It sounds cooler. Just say beer. Look, now AP's going to get an ice cold Coke Zero. You guys impressed with that joke? Hey, Pierce, why don't you hold my ice cold Coke Zero while I get into this?
Continue.
All right, here we go. So, guys, the objections were that this would have been a really tall guy for the time. So, average height 5'3". This is depending on which side you're examining, because keep in mind you have a complete front image, complete back image. 5'10" to 6 feet. That would have been a very tall person at this time. The arms look too long. I think the explanation is because his shoulders would have been dislocated from crucifixion and so on, which would make your arms hang lower, something like that. But let's check this out.
I love this because this is my area of specialty.
Coke Zero?
First, I want to show you something, Piers. I've never shown this on any interview I've done. I just got this from the land of Israel. You just pointed out the fascinating correspondence of the wound marks in the man of the shroud. I'm holding in my hand, Piers. This is not a replica, Piers and Dr. Aceta. This is an actual Roman crucifixion spike that was from the Syrian province. I do a lot of work in archaeology, Pierce. I've been in more first century tombs than any guest you've ever interviewed. And this is 6 inches long. It's an iron spike. And for the benefit of our audience, this is what's so cool about Christianity. Christianity's closest cousin is actually archaeology and history. Other religions can't say that. What's fascinating
Judaism can.
About this crucifixion spike is it's actually bent and curved. If you can see that clearly, it's bent, it's curved. Crucifixion spikes were used again and again on different victims, and to minimize movement and maximize torment, if you can imagine, Pierce, the crucifixion spike would actually be adjusted while the victim was dying of Roman crucifixion. And that's what we see right here reflected in this crucifixion spike. It reminds me of what David wrote in the Psalms 1,000 years earlier, Psalm 22:16. They pierce my hands and my feet. It's interesting.
It's funny. You just said, that's funny. I kept thinking you should do something about Pierce. because he's talking to Pierce Morgan, and then he quotes "Pierce my hands and my feet."
Says that 700 years before crucifixion is invented. When you look at the anatomical questions, and again, this is where my students and my four boys think it's really cool that I'm an expert in execution of the first century, by the way. When we crucified people under the Roman empires, first off, the shoulders would always be separated. And we see that there are abrasions on the shoulder of the crucified man. I don't think you pointed that out yet, Pierce, but when you look at the rear image, there's actual abrasions. Jesus is asked to carry what's called the patibulum. Just to correct, he's not carrying the whole cross. It's just the crossbeam called the patibulum. It would have weighed 125 pounds. Think about this, though, as you write.
That's interesting. I didn't know the weight. The weight of a patibulum. So guys, they would have a post in place, and you would carry the crossbeam, and he's saying the crossbeam itself would be 125 pounds.
He pointed out all the scourge marks. We count 372 scourge marks. That's front and back on the image.
What?
I just have one question, which is just a question that pops in my head when I think about this. Now, I listened to some people or some scholars talk about the crucifixion of Jesus, and there was this one thing, which is that which was commentary on the crucifixion, how it was depicted in the movie The Passion of Christ, and the commentary was basically that despite how brutal it is depicted in the movie, the real crucifixion was probably significantly more brutal and significantly more graphic, significantly more bloody, with flesh and skin being ripped out and flying everywhere. So his body would have been incredibly brutalized.
I don't remember. I don't know the last time you saw The Passion of the Christ, but they got pretty brutal in that, man.
Yeah, but the thing is, since the Shroud is said to depict, the crucifixion and marks and all that, does it also depict the body being as brutally mistreated as it probably was?
The idea is they would have cleaned it up for burial. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They would have washed it for burial and stuff. But you have all sorts of wounds, and you still have blood stains and so on. But there are wound marks all up and down the back, and I think they even have the Romans would use different kinds of whips. Some of them had the chunks of metal that would rip you open. They would attach to you, and when they pulled it back, it would rip you open. They would also use little metal balls in there that over time of lashing you with it, then they eventually start breaking your skin when they're hitting it and stuff like that. But I think they actually have the markings of these little metal balls and stuff like that on the back image. But yeah, that would be an interesting question to ask, because I remember I watched The Passion of the Christ. I watched it once, and then I took Shabir Ali to see The Passion of the Christ before he had any clue who I was. But I remember when I first started watching it, and they're beating him with rods at first, and I was like, that is not what Romans did to prepare someone for crucifixion, man. They called the beating, the scourging, they called it the half death, because victims would be half dead by the time it was finished. And I think it's something like a quarter of crucifixion victims died just from the beating. You died because of the beating. And there are records about they'd be lashing you, and people's intestines would spill out of their bodies because they ripped them open with by beating them and so on. So I think that's where you're going. Is it that bad?
Yeah.
And so that would be interesting question for this dude.
So people are pointing out how messed up it is, or how savagely that is, or of the Romans. The funny thing is, there's something very interesting and something very, very, very deep about it, which is that in Christianity, as Christians, we believe that God comes and takes on flesh and chooses specifically that death for himself, to give his life. And historically, Roman crucifixion is considered one of the most brutal, most messed up ways of executing people. The Romans themselves and others have described it as like bringing about death and dragging and pulling out death while torturing and killing somebody and so on. It's really, 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 really messed up. So there is a sentimental aspect to this as well, that it is God himself who takes on the body and chooses that as, as the way. But the other thing is also the more political value or historical value of it is that this is what the Romans were. They established their authority in a very, they were very civilized. They brought civilization and development and order to wherever they went. They took completely barbaric populations and civilized them and turned like a bunch of garbage into beautiful cities. But they also established their order through such measures by saying, hey, if you cross us, if you try to do something wrong,
no pun with
this
cross.
Is what we're going to do to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I used to mention that, and I think I've heard N.T. Wright talk about this. Like, now the cross is a symbol of like salvation and God's love for us and what God did for us and stuff. The first century, the cross was a symbol of Roman power, right? You saw a cross, it was a reminder, if you mess with us, you will end up on one of these. And so,
and it won't be pretty. Yeah.
And that's why these things would be done in public. You wanted people to know, hey, remember what happened to this dude? That will happen to you too if you mess with us. And it's interesting. Our word excruciating means out of the cross. It was actually taken from, the word excruciating is drawn from crucifixion. Wow. Interesting. Take a couple of super chats real quick. Why were certain Dead Sea Scrolls excluded? What do you mean excluded from what? You mean why aren't they in the Bible? Because the canon of Scripture was decided long before the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. But yeah, the Essenes believe, they had a bunch of writings. That doesn't mean that they're biblical. So I don't know what you're referring to there as far as excluding. It's true the Quran doesn't mention 72 virgins. Yeah, not the number 72. The Quran definitely talks about the houris you'll get, and it gives descriptions of them and so on. The Quran doesn't give the number 72, but it does talk about the virgins you get in paradise. That's from the Hadith. AP, make a song, Israel is the greatest state of all, with Cenk as a sampled hook for the chorus and a sample of Tucker's laugh right after. These are some good suggestions, man.
That's nice.
But they actually need to be in the video, not just the song. That would be good. Hang on. It is famous that's what Pierce is now most famous for, is hang on. Muhammad had some 30 men, their skin as black as coal. And in the desert, late one night, they filled his little... Come on, man. AP's fans over here thinking that a grown man being treated that way in the desert is some laughing matter. Austin said, I'm personally by the way, everyone, in case you missed yesterday, Friday is the day our new Me and Inspiring Philosophy, our new Al-Zut videos come out. And this issue gets way deeper, not in the Al-Zut sense, but it's pretty bad. It's worse than our Muslim friends think. I'm personally about 65 or 70% in favor of the Shroud being real right now. I'm kind of like 30%. There's enough. There are plenty of interesting features that make me think it may be authentic and so on. And there may already be enough evidence to convince me that I just haven't seen it because I haven't paid attention to it enough time. Maybe one day we'll sit down with some experts. Oh, matter of fact, maybe we'll get some experts on this show one day and let them really lay out the case, and we'll see.
You'll see.
Whoever says the Shroud is fake needs to get banned. The crap kicked out of them and stomped on. That's how we do it. I was a Shroud skeptic due to the carbon dating, but did an endlessly exhaustive deep dive and now am convinced. Interesting. And that's the position that guy said he took. The image of the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe is another amazing miracle with big scientific research. David looked at this miracle too.
That's a very solid one. It's a very it is a very, very interesting. You don't know about it?
No,
you should know.
I mean, I keep telling everyone that I forget things now, so I don't know. Maybe I did check it out at some point in history, but no, I have no clue what anyone's talking about right now.
So there's a thing from when was that? From when the Aztecs were there. Our Lady of Guadalupe, where it is believed that Mother Mary appeared to two people and talked to them and said certain things.
Wait, are you saying before Europeans got here?
After Europeans got there.
After Europeans, okay. So you said, but you said Aztecs. So you're saying Aztecs, but after Europeans got here?
Yeah, after they got here.
Okay.
But so that she appeared and talked to these two people, and I don't want to butcher the story, but basically, one of them, as he was talking to her again, said, "How am I supposed to tell people what actually happened? How are they supposed to believe me?" And then he had this big cloth with him. And she said, "Just go, they will believe you." So he leaves, and then he tells the religious authorities there about it. And then he opens that cloth, and there is like a perfect depiction of her, but looking kind of like according to their culture. And I don't know, it's a very interesting and extremely compelling example of a miracle, which is why it's among Catholics it's extremely popular, because there has been a lot of research on it, and even scientific research is like very baffled and can't really explain how the cloth has been in existence since then, but it hasn't deteriorated. It looks perfect. It is like it was impossible to basically create at the time, especially by somebody who has no history with Christianity at all, and so on. So it appears to these pagan people, these native people, non-Christian people there, and then draws them toward Christianity. But it's a very interesting thing which we should maybe sometime look into.
We should. You could pull up some videos on it and stuff like that and pictures, and we could check it out. Let's see. The tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe is the sacred cloak of Saint Juan Diego, on which the miraculous image of the Virgin Mary appeared in 1531, made of native cactus fiber and designed to last only about 15 to 20 years. The tilma has endured for nearly 500 years without any signs of deterioration. Whoa, that would be interesting.
That is the messed up part. It's like scientifically there is very little explanation to how it just has stayed that way. It is exposed, and it just continued being that way without the expected deterioration that should have happened like 500 years ago.
The image itself, which contains deep symbolic meaning relevant to indigenous culture, has baffled scientists as it shows no signs of paint, brushstrokes, or a physical creation process.
Yeah.
Hey, it's in Mexico City. We should just go see that thing, man.
We should. That would be an amazing project.
Interesting stuff all the time.
It also has some incredible symbolism and all that within the picture that appeared. That is that basically, I mean, you have to look into that. It has like several features on it that are basically a message to the natives about letting go of their traditions and finding comfort in this and all that. It's very, very deep, but it's incredible. I don't know.
Hasn't Dr. Habermas done some new work on the Shroud? I don't know if he's done new work, but he wrote a couple of books back in the day on it. In fact, that was something that came up when Nabil, it was Nabil and Nabil's dad and Mike Lacona and Gary Habermas over at Mike Lacona's house. And they were discussing the resurrection. I had asked Nabil a little while earlier, hey, what evidence could there be that would bother you and cause you to doubt Islam? And I was thinking, back then I was thinking, but problems with Muhammad, problems with the Quran, what is it? When I asked him what could happen, what could he see that would make him doubt Islam, he said, to be honest, a lot of my confidence in Islam is just because I have so much respect for my dad as a researcher, and my dad has been teaching me my entire life. So he said, basically, if I saw my dad get backed into a corner and couldn't answer, that would suggest to me that I need to go and reevaluate what he has taught me and so on. And so I was like, oh, cool. And so I got Nabil and his dad together with Mike Lacona and Gary Habermas for a discussion on the resurrection. And Mike and Gary were being so nice that they just kept letting Nabil's dad just talk about how Jesus obviously didn't die. And I'm sitting there thinking, you guys know, I know you know how to respond to this. I know for a fact you know how to respond to this. They were just being respectful and letting him talk until Nabil's dad eventually said, and even the Shroud of Turin shows that Jesus survived. And then all of a sudden, like, Gary perked up and he goes, what did you just say? And he says, yes, the Shroud of Turin gives evidence that Jesus was still alive and survived the crucifixion. And Gary looked at him and he goes, wait, so just to be clear, you believe that the Shroud of Turin is authentic? And Nabil's dad said, yes. And by the way, I've seen that from a bunch of Ahmadis before, so I'm guessing it's standard. I'm guessing someone in there, one of their leaders of their sect has been arguing this because they say it. Anyway, he asked Nabil's dad, he said, hey, do you believe the Shroud of Turin is authentic? And he said, yes. And then he turned to Nabil and he goes, you believe the Shroud of Turin is authentic? And Nabil said, yes. And Gary all of a sudden just goes, Gary just took over the discussion at that point. He said, well, if you believe the Shroud of Turin is authentic, you got some serious problems with your claim here. And then he went on a nice friendly tirade about all the evidence in the Shroud, that this was clearly a dead body. This was a corpse. It was like in rigor mortis and so on, but he starts talking about all the wounds and stuff like that. Anyway, that was an interesting part of Nabil's journey.
Very interesting detail, by the way. So, since what's his name, Johnston, he just mentioned the Psalm 22 earlier, mentioned Jesus being pierced, which King David mentions. When I was looking into, when I was still kind of exploring Judaism and Bible and looking into Christianity and all that, I encountered the whole discussion about a disagreement between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, where in the Masoretic text, in the Hebrew Masoretic text, it doesn't say pierced or dug in, whereas in the Septuagint it does say it corresponds with a word that is pierced or dug in, and then there is a discussion on who actually got it right. And of course, because the Masoretic text is a Hebrew text, especially Jews often lean toward, no, obviously it is actually the Masoretic text that is correct. It doesn't actually say pierced. But then so I look at what the Dead Sea Scrolls actually revealed, and the Dead Sea Scrolls agree with the Septuagint text and say that it does say pierced. So that seems to be a strong historical pre-Christian case for the Christian case. Very nice.
So in Psalm 22 it says, they pierced my hands and feet. Can you imagine if there were a prophecy, an ancient prophecy said, and they pierced his butt, and then Muslims would take that as like miraculous confirmation of Muhammad.
Yeah, totally.
So it's cool that we have what we have. If it had been said differently, it would point in a completely different direction.
It would be proof for Islam.
They would. They'd be using it. I guarantee it.
Yes, you see, Muhammad, he had his butt pierced by the men of Al-Zut. This is a miracle.
Who could have predicted this?
Nicole says, I believe the Shroud is real, but this guy, Jeremiah, sets off my discernment alarms. Yeah, he's not, it's not in a, with me, it's not, oh, he's being deceptive. It's just, it's too much. It's too much friendliness. It's too much. It's like, well, I guess it's perfect for a pastor, right? It's perfect for a pastor to be super nice and encouraging and complimentary and stuff like that. So I think it works because he's also a pastor. Let's see. Carol, no comment, but thank you. Charitard says, is that Mike Gendron? Who's Mike Gendron? Hang on. Mike Gen... No.
No, it ain't.
That is not. You've been refuted.
You've been humiliated.
If Allah... Hey, this is a good point. If Allah abrogates scripture by causing people to forget it, then Allah abrogated the pro-Islam Injil. Because it's been forgotten. No one even has a reference to it.
Yeah,
that's good. That's a good point. I'm going to screenshot that. I'm going to use that and steal it and not give anyone credit. Okay,
always stealing those ideas.
Okay, but does Tristan own a Bugatti? That's funny. I was talking about the French researcher Tristan. Regular photos don't contain 3D information. If it was made with a vertical column of energy, 3D modeling studies of what images should look like from body contact would be irrelevant. Yeah, there's interesting stuff with the image having three-dimensional features. No, because Western Europeans took it from Byzantium and preserved it, and that's when it got popular in the West, and they repaired it, perhaps. Hold my ice cold Coke Zero. Definitely a wingaling. That caused AP to even go get his wingaling shirt.
Well, with all due respect, it was too cringe-worthy. So
that was pretty cringe. AP, she asked me to tell you I'm advanced that a full Japanese dub of your scientific mistakes in the Quran very soon on Natsuki Takama's YouTube channel. You hear that? A full Japanese dub of your isn't that video like an hour long?
Yeah, it is.
That's cool. A full Japanese version.
Natsuki.
God is the hero of the universe, while Alan is scared to come down. God is the main character. Jesus, like a hero, despite anguish, still bore our sin.
Indeed.
Metatron, a great historian, has a great video on the Shroud. He leans in favor of its authenticity. God, most poetic, turned cross into symbol of love and triumph. Yeah. Took a symbol of Roman power and brutality and turned it into a symbol of love and triumph. No wonder he sweat blood and asked God to take that cup from him. With his divine nature, he knew what his death would entail in detail, and yet he still went forward for love of sinful people. What a love, praise God. AP, you need to think about these things. John Feather, no comment though. Living with Jay says, get this guy specifically to join and provide his case for the Shroud to you and AP. I'm about 70 to 75% convinced. But as David said, if it is false, it has no impact on my faith.
True.
Yeah. If I concluded that it is authentic, I would think that's pretty mind-bogglingly awesome. If it turns out to be fake, if they somehow came up with some study and figured it all out and so on and said, nope, this thing was 13th or 14th century, would not affect my belief at all. And the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe also depicts the constellations present in the night sky on that date. And in her eyes, you can see the reflection of the indigenous man and many other details. This is all very interesting.
It is incredible. Really, we need to look into that sometime.
It's weird. I'm not familiar with that.
You should look into it. That's pretty interesting.
And so we shall.
And it's like I learned about that when I hear about the apparitions and all that, and I think, I don't know, man, I don't want to concern myself with that kind of stuff, you know. But then I watch, then I come across a documentary which deals with that kind of stuff, which deals with all of the aspects of it, and it's a non-Christian documentary. And then I'm like, hang on. Then I start fact checking everything that I see there, and it's like, and it turns out it is true. The science is pretty baffled about it, and pretty much everything claimed about it is true, and it is very incredible. Which is why among Catholics nowadays it has an incredible status. Yep.
All right, back to this dude.
we count 372 scourge marks, that's front and back, on the image of the crucified man. We can approximate, because there's no lateral images, that there's over 700 wounds on the crucified man of the cross, or man of the shroud. And what's interesting, he's then asked, this is when Pilate brings him before the mob, before the Jewish mob especially, and he says, Ecce homo, in Latin, behold the man. And then the Jewish leadership who hated Jesus say, crucify him, crucify him. It's documented, and there's actually some phenomenal hematological studies, Pierce, on the blood. We have type AB blood, human blood, and there's some very fascinating.
What? Why are you advertising for vitamin water?
Somebody asked me what that drink is called, which I always drink. It's called Gleku vitamin water.
It's this new drink called vitamin water, everyone.
Yeah.
Work from an immunologist who I just spoke with last week at this conference, Kelly Kurse. It's human blood, it's type AB blood, it's Semitic blood. When the arms are
Said Semitic blood.
so long,
Or what Andrew Wilson would call magic Jew blood.
and it does look like they're very long, Pierce, because when we believe when Jesus falls to the ground, do you remember, Pierce, from your gospel reading that Jesus collapses under the weight of the cross? He can't even get to Calvary. Simon of Cyrene is tasked to carry the crossbeam. And do you know why? We believe that Jesus had lost 1/3 of his blood volume during the scourging. Let that sit in for a minute. He was dying of dehydration, high levels of ferritin, creatinine, based on the blood samples that we have on the shroud. He would eventually die of a massive heart attack on the cross. The reason his arms, though, are so strangely long on the cross is because his shoulders were separated during the crucifixion, and that's what makes the arms look so long. That's the fascinating part about it. Again, the deeper you go into this, it might sound good in a soundbite to say that. Well, no, this actually smacks of authenticity of what we know of Roman crucifixion in the first century world. The thing that's fascinating me, if I may, Pierce, is the amount of energy. This is what I want to get to, because
Amount of energy. So this sounds like he's going to talk about the radiation. But yeah, I've never heard about the amount of energy. If this is going to be mind-blowing here.
this is the latest science and truly breaking news on this program.
Oh, that's why I don't know.
I just interviewed Paulo de Lazzaro. And what's cool about Dr. Aceta and the original STIRP team, peers, that I respect about these men and women, Dr. Aceta was one of 26 scholar scientists who went to Turin, Italy to study this. They're not pastors with a theological axe to grind. They were not privileging this. Even though Dr. Aceta is a believer, they were applying the scientific method. Ray Rogers, who died a great defender of the Shroud, famously said, "Give me 15 minutes in the scientific record, and I'm going to prove this is a complete forgery." He wasn't saying that a few minutes later after studying it, which is really...
Oh, yeah, that was, I mentioned that earlier. That was, all these guys thought this is obviously going to be fake and we're about to prove it. And then almost all of them walked away going, whoa.
Fascinating to think about. When I look at the power, though, Paulo de Lazzaro is doing some amazing work out of ENIA Laboratories. He's a physicist who works with lasers. And this is something that's gone viral when we've shared it. He has postulated the amount of energy it would take to make a chemical change in the flax, in the linen fibrils, because remember the image, Pierce, it doesn't absorb like the blood does. The blood fully absorbs into the shroud. The image is just 2 microns. Pierce, if you took a razor, you could literally shave off the image on the shroud. It's that thin. It's almost unbelievably thin. And this is what science cannot replicate. And so Paulo de Lazzaro at ENIA Laboratories outside of Rome, the physicist, laser expert, spent 5 years and his academic reputation to say he estimates the amount of radiation energy it took. And to bring the audience along by the hand, at the moment of Jesus' resurrection, we believe this happened, 34,000 billion watts of cold radiation traveling at 1/12 of a billionth of a second.
1.21 gigawatts, ladies and gentlemen.
Literally so fast. And because if it would have been hotter, as the STIRP team pointed out, conclusively, this was no scorch. There is no paint. There is no dye. There is no pigment. They published those findings. And in many ways, the STIRP team did not achieve their objective. You know, the scientific objective with the Shroud is the who, what, when, and how of the shroud. None of those answers have been found. We don't know who did it, how it was done. We can't explain it. We certainly don't have that amount of power radiation to change the chemicals in the shroud. What I try to answer as a historian is why it was done.
Why it was done. I have to say, they need a better opponent for this dude. This guy's way too laid back. They should be jumping in a little more. He should be more aggressive.
Let me
Okay, before I go,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
please do. Yeah, please do. Well,
Well,
I'll tell you what,
look,
Joseph. Just before you do, but before you do,
Yeah.
Joseph, just one question and a very quick response, Jeremiah. If we assume that everything you say is correct, that it is dated back to the period when Jesus Christ was known to be on earth and alive and operating, and he was crucified and so on. If we assume it's a crucified body that was shrouded, how many people in that period would have been crucified by the Romans?
so it sounds like Pierce is saying, okay, suppose this is a crucifixion victim. They crucified tons of people, so what's that mean? Have to say, lines up really, really well with Jesus because you have the puncture marks around the head and so on.
Many thousands. They were experts. So remember, the Persians invented crucifixion. Alexander the Great made it great with Hellenization. The Romans perfected it, especially in the Syrian province. We have 21 different records of Roman victims being nailed to the cross, not hung to the cross. What takes it beyond all doubt for me, in 10 seconds or less, the helmet of thorns. There are 50 puncture marks on the scalp and the back of the head, and that makes it beyond all doubt that it's Jesus of Nazareth. No one was crucified the way Jesus was.
Okay, Joseph Assetzi.
This is after Pierce rudely interrupted this guy when he finally decided to jump in with something.
You want to respond to the various things you've heard?
Well, I have several responses. One of which, of course, is that nobody would deny the immense amount of detail in the cloth that matches the gospel accounts. There's no question about that. Getting back to the, I would say, overarching a comment is that if God wanted an image on there, he would have just put it there, and he doesn't have to explain it to us about how it was done. I appreciate the radiation comment that just made, but it turns out that there's no natural radiation mechanism that would give rise to that image. Now, so if it in fact was as the scientists said it was, well, that was a miracle. There's no question about that, and you're asserting that, of course, the image is a miracle in the first place. It turns out that the image content itself by Ray Rogers, it turns out to be oxidized cellulose, either oxidation by heat or oxidation by some other mechanism, for example, acid, okay? And that acid plays into one of my theories regarding the 14th century origins of the cloth. So there's a lot more background here in the scientific domain than can be described in this very brief interview. But there's a lot of factors that are associated with the cloth itself. As he pointed out, the image at the time that we did this, what we found out was basically what it was not, okay, strangely enough. It wasn't a painting, there were no brushstrokes, and we had no immediate explanation for the image. Subsequent investigation showed, as I said, that the image itself is a form of oxidized cellulose, which could have been, as it was pointed out, by a blast of radiation, but it could also...
Okay, so you're saying the image is oxidized cellulose, so that's the browning on the cloth, and Jeremiah Johnston was claiming that it's a burst of radiation, and this other guy says could be caused by heat or something else, or acid. I think he said heat or acid could cause... Wait, so you think the image was caused by acid? I think you might be on acid if you think that's a good explanation. No, I don't know. I'm trying to think what he would think, like, as far as how they're putting this together. Like, if you think it's if you think it's 13th or 14th century or something like this, and they're using acid or heat. Yeah, if you were faking it, here's the thing. If you were faking an image of, wouldn't you just like paint it or something like that? I'm trying to think what the motivation would be for someone to make that. I don't know, but we'll see. What's he got?
Have been printed there with heat or with acid. And my thesis, again, going back to the 14th century origins of this, is that the ink that was used at that time to print textiles was an iron gall ink, which is corrosive, and the document preservationists at this time, in fact, worked tirelessly to save documents from themselves, because the ink eventually eats all the way through the cloth or the material that whatever was printed on. So that plays quite readily into my theory about the possible 14th century origins of this image. Okay, it was block printed. It was block printed with iron gall ink. A form of block printing explains all its optical properties: the negative image, of course, the high resolution, and it also explains the so-called 3D property. That's what you get when you, with a carefully sculptured low relief that's printed on cloth. And again, if it's printed with iron gall ink, over time, the iron gall ink would flake off, because linen is difficult to dye and to color. So ink would flake off over time and eventually corrode. And that's what we see right now in this time period. We see a corrosion of the surface of that cloth, and that is in fact what causes the image proper. As you pointed out.
Okay, so that's a interesting theory. He said there's a kind of ink that you can use that if you were to draw it on, the most of the stuff would eventually flake off, but it has a corrosive feature to it, and he thinks that could make the image.
Before, there's thousands of articles that have been written about all of this. It goes on forever. My position is simply try to explain how this thing was done in the 14th century. And again, if it's a 14th century image, I think that this is a reasonable, has a lot of circumstantial evidence to show how it was accomplished. There's geographical factors. This textile printing was in great development going on just north of Lorraine in France at that time period. They were printing textiles. Somebody who had the skills could have migrated down to Lorraine and created this. There's a confession on record, which of course hasn't been corroborated. Look, the four pillars of authenticity from a rigorous scientific perspective are: one, its age. It has to be 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. Two, we have to show that the cloth ensconced the body of Jesus Christ. Three, there has to be some sort of chain of custody that shows that, where was it for the last 2,000 years ago? And four, there's no mention of this. There's a glaring absence in the Gospels of this image. And, you could rationalize all those, but those are hardcore scientific factors that have to be established before.
So it sounds like he's saying it sounds like he's saying what would convince him. Like, what would you take as proof that this is authentic? He said you'd have to show that it's old enough, that it's 2,000 years old, that it was actually that this was the cloth wrapped around Jesus. You'd have to show where it was during all this time. So that's kind of what would impress him.
You claim rigorously that this is the authentic burial cloth of Christ. That's
and just to be clear,
my story.
Yeah, no, I understand, and you've articulated it very well. But just to be clear, if your thesis is correct, and it was from the 14th century, is your supposition in that circumstance that it was a deliberate forgery intended to dupe people into thinking it was the genuine Shroud of Jesus Christ?
That's actually a good question. Good question. So what do you believe motivated this? Do you believe someone in the 14th century sat down and said, hey, I'm going to put this together to dupe people into thinking that this is the burial cloth of Jesus? Or do you believe it was made for something else? Again, I've seen people think that this was made for like a play back then, and it just ended up, after after being in a fire and stuff and so on, just ended up with some interesting features by luck, basically. But yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what this guy thinks about that.
Well, there's several lines of thought along that question. One of which it was a artistic representation to show the crucifixion to a number of people who were quite illiterate, couldn't read the Gospels at that time. That's one explanation for why. The other one was a deliberate forgery that was designed to entice pilgrims to that church in France. And in fact, as it said, there was a confession on record. Somebody said, a priest wrote to the Pope saying that, yes, it's a forgery. The person who did it confessed to me that it was. Okay, and I think the Pope writes back and says, no, okay, you can show it, but don't tell anybody it's real. Well, of course, that was lost. It in fact enriched the local parish a considerable amount because all the pilgrims were traveling to that part of France at that.
So that would be a motivation if you could fake something. And so I guess the theory here would be you drew something on there, and this would get a bunch of pilgrims. You say, oh, hey, we've got the burial cloth of Jesus in our area, and this would cause people to visit and spend money. And then all the interesting features of the shroud that we talk about today would just be some sort of happy accident. Like you use ink to make the design, the ink flakes off, but it had a corrosive effect and therefore left this photographic negative or something like that. Let's see.
Fine. So, the forgery explanation could be a possibility given its 14th century origin.
Okay. Well, look, I want to bring in another guest now because both of my
Hang on.
experts
You're going to bring in another guest? This guy looked like he was ready to respond to this stuff.
As am I. So in the interest of balance, we're going to be joined now for the final part of this debate by author Seth Andrews, better known as the Thinking Atheist.
See that? You've got the Christian Thinkers Society or whatever, and then this guy's the Thinking Atheist and so on. Everyone putting thinking in their stuff.
But he had Seth Andrews.
Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
Was he one of your heroes when you were an atheist?
No, but he was a friend. He was friendly. I interacted with him once or twice.
Oh, okay, that's nice. Yeah, I'm looking at he's only on for a couple minutes, so they just bring him in here at the end. Not the way Muhammad brought people to his end, but they bring him at the end here. Let's see what he's got to say about all this.
Andrews, welcome to Uncensored. You've been listening to this. What is your response?
Actually, let me clarify. The Thinking Atheist is an icon. It's certainly not me. I came out of a faith culture. And so it's an icon that represents using reason to try to figure out what's true in the world. And I'm certainly not a great thinker. But I'm an ex-evangelical. I was a Christian broadcaster for 30 years. And now I am on the other side of the faith, looking at it through the other side of the lens.
No one ever asked you your entire life history, man. Talking about the Shroud of Turin. I have to wonder what this guy's connection is, because you're talking about two researchers here. The guy in the middle has been studying it for decades, and he was part of the original research team. You got Jeremiah Johnson. He came on board sometime more recently. What is Seth Andrews' relevance to this discussion?
That's what he's trying to explain, man.
Oh.
Right. So tell me about your view of the Shroud of Turin. Do you think it's real? Do you think it's fake? Do you think the whole thing is just a PR stunt? What do you feel?
You think he's going to say it's real?
Of course, I think it's real.
This is obviously a photograph of the resurrection of Jesus.
What I see mostly around the Shroud is a tremendous desire to believe, to connect dots. And it's totally understandable, people who lean into the Jesus story, but, whether or not it dates to the time of Christ or to the medieval era, and I tend not to discount the carbon-14 date. I think apologists are quick to brush it aside, and then they throw out a lot of fancy letters at the end. But I don't think that we have seen a debunking of the carbon-14 dating of the fabric. But even if it did date back to that era, I mean, we're talking about a time where the Romans crucified hundreds of thousands of people. And so now we're connecting a dot and saying this looks like a crown of thorns. And so therefore it is the Christ. And we root that in the Bible itself. and the Christ account in the Bible, which is hugely problematic. I heard references to Josephus. I mean, the Antiquities was, what, 60, 70 years after the alleged death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Josephus was not an eyewitness, and the only reference to Christ was not about the crucifixion, the resurrection, certainly not the Shroud of Turin. The Gospels, I mean, they're not reliable because I think the earliest Gospel being Mark was 69, 70 something CE, long decades after these events were supposed to have happened. The authorship of all four Gospels is not known. Nobody has pinned them down. Nobody can authenticate them. And beyond that,
I have to say this. I know he's your hero, AP, but this is just
a very
terrible.
old talking point, and it's a pretty bad one. Sorry.
Yeah, pretty bad. Guys, remember early on when gosh, what's that guy's name in the middle? I don't think I caught it. The guy in the middle, and I pointed out this is an interesting bit of reasoning. He pointed out, hey, something that's interesting about this is that the carbon dating. And he said, yeah, you can explain that in other ways. You can say that the carbon dating was based on parts of the cloth that were not original and so on. So it was a later date because it was later cloth. Or you could say it was contaminated somehow. You have different explanations. But isn't it interesting that these details line up so well? Namely, yeah, you can have doubts, but it lines up with when we have historical records of when we know what we're actually talking about, that we're talking about the Shroud of Turin. These things converge. These lines of evidence are converging and so on. Along those, guess what? That is an important way of reasoning when you're dealing with evidence. But following that same line, wouldn't it be interesting? So for me, the by far main issue is the dating of the thing. If it's first century, my confidence in its authenticity would go up to 99% if this thing turned out to be first century. It's just the dating was confirmed. But he's saying, hey, even if it goes back to the first century, tons of people were crucified. And so why would you think that this is Jesus? Oh, because of the crown of thorns, but you just have that in the Gospels, and the Gospels can't even be trusted. Okay. Wouldn't it be odd if the Romans, who we have no evidence would put crowns of thorns on people, except for the Gospels, which said they did this to mock Jesus because they were mocking him as the king of the Jews. And so they make a crown of thorns and shove it on his head. Wouldn't it be amazing if the Gospels just made up something about the crown of thorns, and yet the Shroud of Turin had someone with a crown of thorns? And that would be too much of an amazing coincidence there, guys. The Gospels made it up, and yet you have a first century cloth where just by chance, your only image of the time of a crucified victim, he happens to have a crown of thorns on him. That would be too much. You should be looking at this kind of converging evidence, dude, and not thinking that you making fun of the Gospels really answered this issue. So do better next time, man.
the Bible is the same book that makes all kinds of claims we might reject in another context, whether it's giants, 900-year-old people, donkeys that spoke Hebrew,
what does
and
this
a savior
have to do
baby that was
with
born
the Shroud
via ghost
of
sex, if you will,
Turin?
to
He
a
just said
virgin,
ghost sex.
so that the offspring could grow up
Are you interested
and
in this, AP?
sacrifice himself, blood sacrifice, to rescue us from the very torture
What in
chamber.
the world? What in the
Okay.
world
It
does
sounds
that
like you
have
just
anything
want-
to do at all with the discussion about the Shroud of Turin?
Yeah, we're talking about the Shroud of Turin and whether it's authentic, not your whining about Christianity because your grandma made you go to church. My goodness, what a dork. Not even interested. Let's see if let's see if anyone's responding. I don't even know why you. Yeah, I'm not interested in.
Compelling argument against everything you believe about the Shroud, you can respond.
Absolutely. Jesus Christ, the historical record is so clear that in the 89 chapters of the gospel, they all point to that Jesus really lived, he died, and even the greatest skeptics alive of that time had experiences of seeing Jesus alive after he was dead. You can look at my book, Body of Proof, the 7 best reasons to believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus, and you can see that I never mention the Shroud of Turin. Isn't that fascinating, Pierce? I don't believe the Shroud is authentic because I want it to be, and as followers of Jesus, we don't even need the Shroud to be authentic as our best evidence of the resurrection.
Oh, it's interesting. He's responding to what that dude said about, it's just because people really, really want to believe and they want to be connected to something. He's saying, I don't even use this as, yeah. He's saying I don't even use this as evidence, and it's not required, and we have the evidence.
Sky Daddy.
Atheists ruin every discussion. I'm just going to say it. But if you're a nice atheist and you're just losing your mind right now, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about all the other atheists.
With all due respect, seriously, with all due respect, I mean, can't you come into the discussion and actually just stick to the topic instead of going down this whole path of
Bible fake, Sky Daddy.
why?
Yeah.
Why?
Something along the lines of, he argued that it's earlier than thought, and here's why he's wrong. He said this, but here's why he's wrong. Not just, I really don't, me no like Christianity, me no like it, it's bad, it's dumb. Let me use arguments from 1970 that have already been refuted.
Many other lines of evidence, but what's fascinating... Yeah, exactly. It's not an article of faith. And what's fascinating to me is when you look at the historical records, they stand on their own. Even atheist scholars like Garrett Ludemann said, and others say, I cannot argue with the fact that the earliest followers of Jesus were first hostile to the Christian message. They had experiences of seeing Jesus alive after he had been dead. And they say, now, what kind of experiences those were, we can't explain, but we know those experiences not only changed the lives of the followers, but also change the world forever. And again, there's such great evidence for the authenticity of the Gospels. We know that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the Gospels. We know that Paul writes 20 years before the Gospels, that incredible passage that no serious historian or scholar calls into question.
1 Corinthians 15.
1 Corinthians 15, saying this is the gospel, that Christ died for our sins, according to the Scripture, he was buried, and he rose again on the 3rd day, according to the Scriptures. A quick note about Josephus. There's some phenomenal work being done, published by Oxford University Press, T.S. Schmidt. Josephus absolutely knew and had firsthand acquaintance with those who attended the trial of Jesus. So,
this is funny. He's burning him up right here, man.
Again, you have your choice. You've got to think for yourself. This is what I do at Christian Thinker Society. You've got to get beyond the sound bites. You've got to get to the substance, read these things for yourself, and you'll be amazed. Christianity doesn't need to be defended. It stands up for itself.
Wow. Yeah. So interesting stuff. Yeah, glad he burned him up there. So for atheists, if you have a commitment to naturalism and so on, you don't want to accept miraculous explanations and so on. He pointed out there, it's interesting, the passage in 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul lists an early Christian creed, refers to Jesus' death, his burial, his resurrection, and his appearances to a number of groups and individuals. It's interesting that was argued that dates to within a couple of years of Jesus' crucifixion. It was actually the atheists who were arguing that is our earliest material, and so on. So the point is, if you've heard this as, but the Gospel of Mark is 70 AD, so long we don't have... Okay, we've got something that goes back to within 2 to 5 years of the crucifixion of Jesus. So that's extremely early material, and it's talking about his death, resurrection, and appearances to a number of his followers. So if you want to explain it in terms of hallucinations or something, do that, but just don't sit there and say, but the Christian sources are so late, we have no idea what's going on there. That's stuff. That's why we said this is stuff from like 60, 70 years ago. This has all been refuted. We know for a fact the earliest Christians were convinced Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead and appeared to them. Ask an actual scholar. Ask Bart Ehrman if the disciples were convinced that Jesus appeared to him, risen from the dead. This guy has apparently not caught on to even what atheists,
this is why
atheist scholars say.
This is why some people don't like, some atheists don't like Bart Ehrman, because he agrees with the historicity of much of what Christianity claims, or what Christians believe in, because he knows that it's true, because he knows that the historicity is accurate. This is why they don't like him, and kind of he's not very popular among many of the new atheists.
That's why they humiliate him. Yeah, you had a bunch of atheists who went in the mythicist direction, and Ehrman made fun of them. Like, do you guys realize how stupid you sound to anyone in the scholarly world? You sound like complete idiots. You had to break that down. And then, well, we don't like you anymore. We only want to hear that we smart and we smarter than everyone else, and that Jesus was just made up.
We don't like you no more.
Let's take these super chats and then we'll be out. Will you be visiting Dearborn anytime soon? I have no official plans, but at some point I'd like to ask God Logic if he wants to go do what we did in Times Square. But in Dearborn, I think we get more Muslims showing up. I think we would get more Muslims showing up to that.
Let's do it.
And keep in mind, I mean, it's actually good. We would love to have discussions with a bunch of Muslims there, especially Dearborn. Tons of Shias there, tons of Shia Muslims. So they'd actually be given some different perspectives on things. Yeah.
That sounds like Shia action. Let's do it.
Yeah. And I was talking to Shias there who would say, hey, they would be watching my videos and they would say, hey, man, we agree with a lot of what you say. This Sunni stuff is crazy. And so they actually agree with a lot of our criticisms of stuff against Islam, because a lot of our criticisms are based on Sunni hadiths, and the Shias don't like them either. So we have some interesting common ground there.
I don't know, it feels like discussions with Sunnis are more relevant. I mean, discussions with the Shia could pretty quickly get Shiite, you
know. English has a word to describe the pain of hanging on a cross. Excruciating. Yeah, I mentioned that. That's where our word comes from. This is for AP and his chopper. Get to the chopper. It's not going to AP.
Chopper.
You're on my channel right now. You're on my channel. They're paying for your chopper. Get to the chopper. My question is, how do you forge the imprint?
You don't.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. So if he's actually arguing that this, certain type of ink could cause an image and then the ink flakes off and then, it has a corrosive property which could leave that. Okay, do it. Even if it's going to take a long time, take an image, make one. You might have to let it sit for a while, but you should be able to replicate it then. So that for me would be, and keep in mind, guys, it's very easy to take a cloth and make kind of a brownish image on it. Any idiot can do that. You could do that with some paint and so on. If you start examining it, it's not going to line up with the shroud. It's not, in other words, it may look similar. It's not a real parallel. So that would be the most impressive thing to me as far as debunking the shroud. Make another one like it using the tools that were available in the 13th and 14th century. But just saying ink, that's not enough. Now, maybe he's right, but that's not compelling. Look up the Mangalica pig has fur like a sheep. The real Islamic dilemma, if you catch my drift. Because they'd like it, but it would be a pig. Let's see. Jason didn't leave a comment there, but here one. What do y'all think of John 27? That verse clearly rebuts the Shroud of Turin as of being authentic, does it not? No. I think you're referring to the verse that talks about strips of linen. No, read the other Gospels. They talk about Jesus being wrapped in a cloth or a shroud. So you can and you have, as far as the mentioning of the head cloth, right? Seems entirely plausible that they wrapped him in multiple things. Like you have a cloth around his head to absorb the blood so you don't lose the blood. Then you have the burial cloth and then wrap strips of linen around it or something like that. So I don't think just quoting John, quoting a verse, is a decisive refutation. Because you said clearly rebuts it. He's a fool along with Pierce. Who?
Who?
That new dude? I have to say the two original dudes were both cool. You had one guy who's clearly more amped up because of all his Coke Zero that he drinks, got a lot of caffeine in there. You had another guy laid back, but he's an OG. He's been doing this for decades and stuff. And then you get a new guy along who just wants to whine about Christianity, and it's
Skydaddy.
yeah. So the real reason some people think the Shroud is real because they need a Sky Daddy, and they think this would be relevant to their belief in their Sky Daddy. Sky Daddy. That'd be funny if everything these guys said in response, he just started yelling, Sky Daddy, Sky Daddy. That'd be perfect, man. I'm an ex-Muslim, and I've been saved by the grace of our Lord Jesus. And thanks to you guys, I've started my own channel to prove Islam is wrong. You guys are my beloved brothers, and I love you both. So that channel is The Gospel Message, everyone.
Super based.
Good. We need more ex-Muslims making more content. The Shroud appears in the Pray Codex from 1192 to 1195, so 14th century tech could not have been used. Are you assuming that that's referring to the same Shroud? How do we know there weren't 20 different shrouds circulating back then?
In your faith.
He hasn't mentioned that they found pollen from plants only found in the surrounding area of Israel. I mentioned the pollen and so on, but I would also want to verify that because I read about it, but I want to double and triple check and see what critics say about things like that. Shame Pierce didn't get Dillahunty, a true expert. Yeah, that would have been the most powerful. Shroud of Al-Zut would contain the stains of 50 men. 30. That's a super sticker. Thank you. Let's see. Mass mutual hallucination is the biggest meme argument. I debated Deconstruction Zone, ex-false Christian. He says it was a doppelganger who tricked a disciple or two, demonic losers. Yeah, do you mean the twin theory or an actual doppelganger? But yeah, there was the twin theory. That was one of the dumbest responses ever. But it's interesting that people put forward the twin theory, that Jesus had a long-lost twin who showed up right after his crucifixion, and then he portrayed himself as Jesus and so on. That's a really stupid theory, but the reason for that was people realizing that group hallucinations to all these individuals and groups, both people who followed him during his lifetime and people who didn't believe in him during his lifetime, like James and Paul and so on, that saying everyone started hallucinating about this guy around the same time doesn't make a lot of sense. And that caused some people to go, maybe he just had a long lost twin. Kind of weird stuff. But don't call people demonic losers or mustache whores or anything like that. Let's use nice words. Other atheists call him as insult honest airman. That's funny. Do they? That's funny. Wouldn't the flaked ink not leave blood type AB? Yeah, so this is an issue where you need a combination hypothesis. So if you're accounting for the actual image, the browning on the cloth, then you'd have to explain that in terms of this ink flaking off and having a corrosive, but other features of the cloth you have to explain in other ways. So you need a combination theory. Here's how I account for the blood. Here's how I account for this and so on. And so the more things you need to account for, the less probable your explanations are going to get and until you actually can account for all of them.
That's true.
The intercession of Our Lady of Guadalupe was credited for the victory in the Battle of Lepanto. A copy of the image was given to them by the King of Spain for the battle. Crazy it had only happened 40 years earlier.
Nice.
That's why we humiliated them.
Wanted to let you know, AP, that you're not alone in the orthosphere. I am a traditionalist Orthodox who stands with Israel against those who martyred the saints.
I appreciate that. Very, very much. Very based.
You are not alone.
There are a lot. It is just there is an online trend that is pretty weird.
It's pretty weird and creepy. and says, why would they add human blood from a tortured person to a prince? Also, the image does not exist under the blood, so blood first, image second. Huh. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. All right, AP, anything we need to inform people about?
Anything we need to inform people about?
We're going live on your channel soon?
Probably tomorrow. Tomorrow might not be possible, but Tuesday might be possible. So
Tomorrow or
Tuesday.
Tuesday work.
Tuesday might be possible. Tuesday
we'll probably do something. Tomorrow might do something early in the day. Tomorrow I got stuff to do in the evening, but Tuesday might be possible. And then I'm supposed to debate Dee's response on Thursday. And yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and I have got videos. To post. So should be posting some dope videos all leading up to the new latest information on the Al-Zut. That'll be on Friday. Supposed to have live streams on Wednesday. Wednesday. Whose channel am I on Wednesday? I'm on someone's channel on Wednesday. Then Thursday and Friday, we're supposed to be talking about two different issues with Jay Smith, because that's you got a lot of people interested. You got a lot of people responding to Jay Smith, and now there's been a number of debates and so on, and people going back and forth. And so going to be looking into some of those claims, specifically about the coin issue and the claim that Jesus is the Mahmad of Song of Solomon 5:16, and therefore that Muhammad is actually based on Jesus. But I'm not terribly familiar with the argument, but we'll be checking that stuff out to get to the bottom of things, although not in the way the Al-Zut got to the bottom of things.
He said Muhammad is based.
All right, everyone. I think we've got
it right here. David said Muhammad is based.
Yes, you see it. He is totally based.
Got a bunch of stuff coming out this week. Should be a fun week for us. Bad week for Dawah. As always.
Bad week for Dawah.
Bad week for Dawah. Bad year for Dawah. Just all bad for Dawah. Catch you all next time.